The story takes place in a royal empire. One day, two young men came to the emperor to ask for Hannah's hand in marriage. Count Alex and Prince Robin became guests of the estate. Alex admitted that he had long been fascinated by the king's daughter, and Robin believed that he had the right to choose the girl he liked from the 5 princesses. That girl was the king's daughter, Hannah, but the problem is that the lady is already pregnant. As soon as the boys visited the emperor's palace, rumors immediately spread throughout the kingdom. Aristocratic girls were discussing how both boys wanted Hannah, but they tried to conquer the Trick Empire, where Robin comes from, and lost, so they promised to give them one of the princesses as a sign of friendship. In fact, the same girl has long known the answer to this question, because she experienced it in a past life. That day, the pregnant daughter was returning home in a snowstorm in an ordinary carriage. It was not at all clear how the higher nobility dared to send the countess away in such a state. It seemed too cruel even to Sophia, the lady's assistant. The maid immediately began to express her dissatisfaction with how the emperor dared to have affairs with this girl right in their own house. At that moment, Hannah asked Sophia not to get too angry, because in any case, the girl was happy that she would have a child. During a carriage ride, the girls had to get out of it, because the coachman reported that the car had broken down. It turned out that this was just a ruse to throw Sophia out of the carriage, and then forcefully push Hannah towards the Duke. But everything was different. Who would have known that this was a well-thought-out plan to meet a guy already familiar to Hannah? He was outspoken about the fact that that miss should become his wife, so the guy simply had no choice but to steal the lady. Now he was only interested in one course of events: for Hannah to disappear forever with her child. Without thinking twice, the guy just silently led the girl straight to the edge of the cliff and then indifferently pushed her down. When the girl opened her eyes, she felt a cold sweat running down her face. She immediately grabbed her stomach to check on her baby. Looking around, the lady realized that she had just had a nightmare. Next, the lady was met by her assistant, Sophia. The girl told her that after they arrived from a neighboring kingdom to collect the reward, the palace was filled with a full house. Hannah herself was surprised by the fact that Prince Wit had arrived in their chambers again. But the maid reacted extremely strangely, pointing out that the prince had never come here before. Sophia explained that the king had promised him, as a sign of friendship, to give one of his daughters in marriage, and he had come to do so, sir. But what was the surprise of the main character of this story when the lady realized that this had already happened 2 years ago? It was then that Hannah realized that she had returned to the past. At this time, the second heir to the Trick Empire, Robin, had already galloped into the imperial palace on horseback. The other people immediately noticed the man's fierce eyes. They noticed that his eyes glowed at the sight of blood. Rumors spread throughout the castle that if it hadn't been for this boy, the kingdom wouldn't have lost the war and wouldn't have had to pay anything. They considered Robin a crazy maniac. Other nobles also assumed that the heir should have a princess wife. Besides, Alex is only the second prince. He has no real power in Trick. Listening to all these conversations, the heroine remembered how 2 years ago everyone in the district thought the same thing. Therefore, the nobles felt sorry for the princess who would become his wife. But Hannah herself now knows that the heir to the Empire of Trick will soon die of illness, and in the struggle for the throne, he, Robin, will win. He will become the Emperor of Trick, and the princess, who was given to him as a bride as a sign of friendship, will become the empress. And then a pregnant girl named Hannah will die at the hands of her husband, Count Alex. This blonde man swore his love for the girl, but when the lady became pregnant, he cooled off towards her. Soon, the lady no longer cared about his love. The girl only wanted to protect her child. Once Hannah realized she had been reborn, she decided to change her strategy a bit. Her goal now was to survive, even though she couldn't openly tell anyone about it. The maid herself did not understand what was the point of dressing up like that if her mistress was going to marry Count Alex anyway. After all, they had 5 princesses, so why would they go to a neighboring kingdom? Hannah explained that a guest had arrived at the palace and that he should be greeted properly, especially since he had come looking for a new pair of clothes and had asked for new clothes. Sophia also explained that despite the fact that the king does not particularly love Hannah, the lady thinks that he will not deprive his wife of the opportunity to live peacefully in love. and the lady really agreed with the assistant's opinion. Alex's mines bring in a lot of taxes, so he certainly won't refuse him. But Count Alex isn't so stupid as to want a half-breed girl born to a maid as his wife. So it was obvious that a man would give the lady as his wife. It was the same in a past life. Looking through her wardrobe, Hannah still asked if she had a more striking outfit and asked for brighter jewelry. And although she didn't like to stand out, she wasn't going to believe in love in this life. The main character of this story promised her future child that she would make her the heir to the empire. In this life, Hannah will control her own destiny. Moreover, knowing approximately her fate, the outcome of events will not be so difficult to change in favor of the lady. Afterwards, a reception was held in honor of Hannah's mother's birthday. This woman was a servant in the palace. The king liked her, so a few years later, the main character of this story was born, and she was made a concubine. The ladies gathered together to talk about the earl of their kingdom. Mother thought that soon the young man would officially ask for her daughter's hand in marriage. Many noblewomen wanted to marry him. Count Alex was popular, so the woman considered their family lucky that he was considering Hannah even despite her lowly origins. In fact, in a past life, Hannah thought the same way, so she accepted his offer and was happy and grateful. But now that the girl had learned what kind of person this scumbag really was, the lady decided to do everything in her power to marry Robin, a monster who knows nothing but blood and war. After his arrival, he has never appeared in public, so now it will be difficult for the girl to find the key to get closer to this man. But at that moment, the girl remembered the perfect excuse. Today was her mother's birthday. In her past life, the day after her mother's birthday, something happened. On that seemingly unremarkable day, Robin killed a man in the palace. Soon, Miss Hannah reported to a palace employee that Robin had had some things stolen, and that he suspected the guard. Although he might be wrong, Miss decided to talk to the chief assistant about it. Hannah, in turn, said that the embroidery with the image of the goddess on the outside of the pocket, with precious purple stones instead of her eyes, had disappeared. To tell the truth, Hannah didn't know where or how this man had stolen this embroidery, but she knew what this work of art looked like and who the thief was. That's why the lady was so confident in stating that the uniform belonged to one of the guards. The young man had stolen her and would die tomorrow at Robin's hands. But in this life, the lady knew she had to change the course of events using this information. She told him not to worry, she had come to solve it. First of all, the lady pointed out that the boy had picked up the item in the Western Palace and did not know who owned it, so he could not return it. The lady explained that if he gave the item to her, she would return it to the prince. Of course, the palace employee simply could not refuse such an offer to competently extricate himself from this dangerous situation. He really hoped for Khan, because he had no one else to rely on. The first point of the plan was successful. That day, the lady saw the embroidery for the first time up close. It was even more brilliant than Kana remembered it. Most likely, this thing was very expensive. In fact, Robin really values the item. The lady has heard that he tries never to be apart from it for long. With the help of this item, Hannah will be able to meet the Count and maybe even talk. The girl knew that if she could somehow attract his attention and he would ask for her hand in marriage, then everything would turn out truly wonderfully. Before he could even run through part of the plan in his head, the silhouette of a dark man crept up imperceptibly to the lady's back. "I plan to kill the thief right there," the man said in a low voice, pointing the blade of his sword straight at Hannah's throat. The heroine was so lost in thought that she didn't even notice Robert enter. But as soon as the man saw his embroidery in the lady's hands, he immediately began to behave like a wild animal. A second later, Robin, with deft movements of his hand, snatched out the same sacred thing and calmly exhaled. And the boy himself was glad he had brought her back, before he had killed anyone. It would have been a bad thing if he had been a little late. Seeing the shining sword in the hands of a strong man, Lady Hannah even thought for a moment that she would die again in this life because of theft. Therefore, the girl also began to apologize to His Highness, demanding to be heard. The girl fell to her knees, explaining that she had neither wanted to steal nor hide his valuables, but only planned to visit her husband tomorrow and deliver the piece of cloth directly into his hands. But the man himself did not understand why she would come to him after she had covered up for the thief. The girl explained that she was afraid that the man would kill the kidnapper and that this would cause a conflict between the countries. To calm the young man down, the lady began to blackmail him a little with politics, but the gentleman then went on the attack. "If you love your country so much, why didn't you stop this stupid invasion of the empire?" he suddenly asked. Moreover, the brave knight Robin could still smell the blood of the kingdom's warriors, whom he had slaughtered in the war. In order not to run into even greater danger, the countess admitted her guilt in their encroachment on foreign territories and confirmed that, in this case, it was appropriate for their people to apologize. The lady also explained that it was for that very reason that her father had arranged with Emperor Trick to give one of the kingdom's princesses as a wife to the heir to the neighboring imperial palace. And Robin, in turn, confirmed this. Besides, Robin had heard that in their kingdom of Hannah, there were as many as 5 princesses, and it was not difficult to guess that the lady sitting directly in front of him was one of them. In fact, the guy hasn't really looked at anyone yet. He hasn't even thought about who he should choose as his wife, although it's obvious that in his past life, he rejected everyone in a row. If rumors are to be believed, he has no interest in women at all, and the only reason he needs a wife is to produce an heir. But her child became an heir, while Hannah's child never survived. In a moment, without even thinking, the lady suddenly suggested that the man choose her. The girl said that she planned to ask the guy about it when he came tomorrow, saying that if he chose her, she would do anything he asked. After hearing this, a smile even flashed on Robin's face. At first, the man was angry that after the victory, his father decided to give him one of the concubine's daughters. But everything turned out to be much more fun than he had imagined. This time, the prize of war was asking him on his knees and in only his underwear to take her as his wife. How strange and awkward it looked. At that moment, the girl realized that her entire body was visible in this peignoir, which made her very embarrassed, and she began to cover her most delicate parts with her hands. But then the guy expressed his surprise as to why the lady was covering her body with her hands, because she herself wanted to become his wife. And besides, she herself agreed to entertain her husband so that he would forgive her. So, Hannah must entertain Robin to touch his heart. The girl herself understood that she, no matter what, must change her true destiny, so she was ready to do anything to stay alive. "If it would be more interesting for you, if nothing would interfere with the view, then I would be happy to," the girl said, before throwing back the translucent fabric. Immediately after that, the lady appeared before him, completely naked. What to do next? Hannah did not know. But then the man tried to fix the awkward moment. He threw his cloak to the lady so that she could cover herself. Then he explained that he had not come this far to have fun with a woman's body. At first, he asked his interlocutor only because he was genuinely curious, and the princess undressed so openly and freely in front of a stranger. The lady had to share with the boy that there was a man who intended to propose to her. Moreover, the young lady explained that, most likely, her father would give her to this guy, and the girl herself did not want that. The man then suggested that the princess could safely refuse the engagement, but Hannah replied that she had no choice in the situation. She has the right to choose only if His Majesty Robin takes the girl as his lawful wife. In a second, the man immediately saw how much the girl disliked this chosen one. It could happen that instead of a tiger, Khan would end up in the mouth of a dragon. Besides, the guy himself knew what various rumors were going around about him. Since childhood, with his cruelty, Robin was more like a beast than a man. Giving in to his instincts, he could go crazy and lose control. The shedding of blood is much more interesting to him than the embrace of a girl. But in response, Hannah indicated in a cold voice that she no longer cared. At the same time, the young lady asked the guy to promise her only one thing: she would carry his child. All this is because procreation is one of the duties of the count's wife. The lady even explained that a man may not love her at all, but at the same time protect and guard the child she will give birth to. Before they could discuss their mutually beneficial plan in more detail, one of the castle employees knocked on the door. It was Sophia, who had seen the firelight on the curtains through the window and noticed that the window had opened. She even offered to help her enter the room and close the window, but the lady refused. Before the man left the room, he told the princess to come tomorrow at noon. Only then would he give an answer. After all that was said, the guy calmly jumped out of the window, landing on 2 feet, even though it was the second floor. This guy was truly insightful. The next day, at noon in the castle, Princess Hannah's chief assistant noticed how wonderful her lady looked today. Hannah seemed to be glowing today. It was clear that the lady was expecting guests. Then, Sophia noticed a wound on her mistress's arm. It was a scratch from last night that wasn't healing very quickly. But Hannah wasn't thinking about her health at all right now. She was only interested in the question of whether this man would accept her proposal. The girl simply couldn't imagine what the gentleman was really thinking. She noticed that he didn't seem to be interested in a woman's body at all. She wondered if appearing in front of him like this might change something. That same day, Hannah met the person she had never planned to meet. It was an influential lady who first of all pointed out loud that she had no idea Hannah would be here. The other ladies immediately began to whisper about the meeting of the 2 ladies. The aristocrats noticed the face with which the girl had captivated Count Alex and was now trying to seduce Prince Trick. Saying all this out loud made Hannah feel very uncomfortable, because in addition to her appearance, the gossip also touched Hannah's mother. The nasty ladies said that her mother was the same way. Hannah's mother was forcibly forced into marriage by a drunken king, but she lived in shame all her life because of it. So she wanted to give her all to the person who would love her. She saw Robin and apologized for yesterday. The lady also brought the boy the clothes that His Majesty had lent him yesterday in a pretty box. Then, the main character of this story met Robin's assistant, Evan. He introduced himself and promised to take the lady to where the gentleman himself was waiting. But as soon as Hannah wanted to introduce herself to the guy, he immediately interrupted her and explained that he was not interested in her name. The guy immediately touched on the topic of answering yesterday's question. He said that now he also has conditions. If the girl agrees to everything, he will make her his wife. To begin with, the guy asked the question of whether Alex was a match for the heroine. After all, the man knew that all the aristocrats were talking about it, as if Alex was passionately in love with Hannah. Then the guy decided to clarify whether the girl did not like this man. The prince also dared to suggest that the lady simply wanted to take the throne and explained that the girl was making a mistake. The princess immediately explained that she did not need such a life as a couple, although she could not say why. The heroine was simply sure that if she told the truth, she would simply not be understood. Therefore, that day, Hannah once again assured her interlocutor that she wanted to become his wife. The lady also added that if he agreed, she would fulfill all the duties of a wife flawlessly. First of all, he explained that by becoming his wife, she would receive only a high title and nothing more. He promised to help her, but the girl had to remember that she could not ask for anything more than a child. And even after giving birth to an heir, Robin promised not to give him a single drop of power. Such were the conditions of the fearsome-looking knight. Although the main character of this story calmly replied that she could easily do it, she even happily accepted all the conditions. After that, the man promised that he would propose to her tomorrow. Now the lady was really glad that at least something had finally gone the way she wanted. Then they said goodbye and went their separate ways to their palaces. As soon as the lady said goodbye to her future husband, her chief assistant, Sophia, immediately asked the boss how everything had gone and what the young people had talked about. Everyone was really very interested, because the young man had invited the young lady himself. At the same time, the assistant was worried that Count Alex might misunderstand everything and start to get jealous. At that moment, Sophia could not even imagine that the princess would soon become queen. That day, Hannah only said that she was a little worried about the upcoming wedding, without revealing all the cards. In response, Sophia asked her not to worry, because at least the eternal assistant had a young lady. The maid promised that tomorrow she would do everything so competently that the boss would be the most beautiful. Sophia sincerely wanted everyone to be so delighted with her beauty when the count proposed to her that they would be unable to come to their senses for a long time. The next day, all the fashion archives in the castle were opened to select the best outfit and luxurious jewelry for the young princess, and Hannah herself wanted to look simply extraordinary, but at that moment she even wondered if she had accidentally overdone it. When the celebration began, the girl also met the king's daughter, Sarah. The friends immediately remarked aloud how overconfident the princess had become, since she was soon to become a countess. The ladies saw how different the young ladies looked today. At the same time, they still discussed their peer's appearance with a smile, pointing out that the girl was worried that her husband might change his mind, and that was the only reason she had dressed up so much. And although these unpleasant aristocrats tried to spoil the heroine's mood, Alex soon appeared in front of her, who lightened the mood a little. He first complimented the girl, saying how incredibly beautiful she was today. In fact, Hannah didn't really want to attract his attention, but the jewelry caught his eye so much that he simply couldn't help but look at it. In addition, at that moment, he noticed a scratch on the back of the girl's hand. He grabbed Mrs. Hand to bring her wound closer to him and examined everything carefully, and then asked what kind of scratch it was. Since the girl could not tell the whole truth, she had to lie that she had just scratched herself on a branch. The man believed her and became angry with the girl's servant. As soon as everyone around him started whispering about the count, the guy decided to apologize to his interlocutor, directly pointing out that he had put the lady in a not-so-comfortable position. Then the knight joined their dialogue. First of all, he approached the girl, showing that he had been looking for her among the others for a long time. He touched the lady's hand and even kissed it lightly, apologizing for the wound he had inflicted. It seems that the etiquette of the North is very different from that of Alex's palace. Therefore, the crown prince was angry just by looking at the young man's behavior towards his chosen one. Alex explained that the girl and the young man are not close at all, so kissing the hand during such a relationship is bad form. He paid special attention to the fact that you should not kiss the hand of a stranger's girl, and even grabbed the poor lady by the brush. In response, Robin pretended to be a fool, and said that he himself could not have imagined that a person who respected etiquette so much could allow himself such expressions. Of course, the blonde did not like the rudeness, so the men began to play sports in public. First of all, Robin pointed out how Alex deliberately butted into the conversation about the princess. After all, this could be interpreted as an unwillingness to maintain peace between their states. And the king himself first noticed that there was such a gloomy atmosphere between Princes Robin and Alex, so he decided to ask the boys about it personally. Robin said that he heard that Princess Hannah would be given to him today, so he asked if he could make the choice himself. Then Alex joined in the conversation, remembering how he had previously spoken to the king about this, and the emperor had already promised to give him his answer today. Alex mentioned that he wanted to marry Hannah. Imagine the king's surprise when he listened to the boys and realized that they both wanted to choose this girl as their wife. To attract all the attention to himself, Alex immediately began to assure that he had loved this girl for a very long time and sincerely asked for the older man's blessing. However, then Robin remembered that his interlocutor had the right to choose any of the 5 princesses, and the knight liked this girl more than all the others. What to do now? The king himself did not understand how correct the choice would be in this situation. He simply could not refuse the heir to another empire. But even then, the count also gave his word. The king decided to turn first to Earl Robin. The man discussed aloud that the boy had not even seen all 5 princesses yet, so he was in too much of a hurry with his choice. But the guest from the Trick Kingdom was not going to give up. In a moment, he pointed out that the king had forgotten something. Count Alex must apologize. The knight noted that little blood seemed to have been shed in the war. After all, Robin could have completely burned down the neighboring palace and taken all 5 princesses into slavery as hostages. Everyone, therefore, knew perfectly well that the king had simply dared to kill him, and not once. This could really have become a threat to the kingdom. Therefore, his father ordered the young count, who occupied such an honorable position, not to disgrace the family, and immediately apologized to the neighboring lord. Alex had no choice but to sincerely apologize for crossing the line in front of His Majesty, and now hoped that Robin wouldn't be angry and would just enjoy the evening. Then Robin remembered that the only way he could enjoy this evening was to marry the same girl. The earl pulled Hannah to him and explained that then she and the lord would be flowers. At this moment, Another aristocratic lady began to loudly express her opinion that this should not be done. She was already in tears, begging the king to change his decision. However, then Robin noted that yesterday he had lost one thing, and it was Hannah who had helped him find it. Now the Earl promised to do the same. In gratitude, he would help the girl find her place, take her in, and take care of her. Hannah immediately noticed how tenderly her future husband spoke about all this. Besides, she knew it would be better than if everyone saw her leaving unwillingly. Before letting the young princess go, the king explained to her that now she was also responsible for His Majesty. It was all for the sake of their empire. After what was said, it became clear that the king had blessed the newlyweds, and Alex was visibly angry. To add fuel to the fire, Robin decided to apologize for bringing the count almost a wife. Then right there, the man also suggested that the interlocutor take a chance. It turned out that the knight wanted the count to choose a wife right away. The king also considered this a wonderful proposal and immediately ordered the count to make a choice for his future wife. But the only one who was needed for Alex was Hannah. But now no one listened to Alex. The man was so desperate that he pointed his finger at a completely random girl and indicated that she would be his wife. In fact, this lady was Robert's wife in a past life. So the main character became Robert's wife, and she became the count's wife. Fate turned upside down. To leave the unpleasant situation, the count noticed aloud that his bride was a little surprised by everything that had happened and demanded to speak to the miss alone. They went out into the palace garden to be alone. Of course, this was just an excuse to get out of there. As soon as the guys were alone, the knight immediately pointed out that he had done everything as the lady had asked, and there were no more problems. The most important thing was that the heroine was happy that she would not have to marry this Alex, and was truly grateful to the knight for everything that he had done as she had asked. The weather was so hot that day that the young man was already feeling sleepy, so he decided to lie down on a nearby bench. Then the lady remembered that in the country where Robin comes from, it is always winter, so this may be the last summer. Sitting on the bench, Hannah noticed a pregnant girl passing by. It seems that this aristocrat is in the last month of pregnancy, the simplest time when the whole body becomes heavy. But is there any joy in the fact that you are about to meet a baby? In her past life, Hannah never experienced this, so now she wanted to see the baby as soon as possible. If only she had lived a little longer then. Emotions overcame the girl so much that she could not hold back her tears. The girl admitted that she simply remembered her mother and suddenly cried. That day, Hannah told about how her mother was a maid in the palace. She gained the title after the birth of her daughter, but Her Majesty did not love her. Then the woman realized that it seemed that without her daughter, it would be even harder for her to live in this cursed palace. It was not difficult to guess that Hannah was being spoken of so badly, since her mother was a former servant. It seems that the man had heard everything, because he understood it immediately. However, he confessed that he did not like it at all. The master did not like the fact that there were so many rumors about the princess. As soon as the girl heard the news about this situation from Robin, she even thought that she had told him all this in vain. But he would have found out everything sooner or later anyway. Literally in a second, the guy decided to ask his interlocutor if that was the king who got drunk and forcibly took her mother. But now everyone is laughing at Hannah and her mother. To calm the girl down, the knight explained that the man was the only one to blame for all this, the one who had even said all the bad words. In addition, the man added that he did not like anything in this country, from the weather to the culture. The count promised that as soon as everything was resolved with the engagement, they would leave immediately. But before that, Robin decided to tell the girl to spend this time with her mother. The boy was not going to come back here again. Then he offered the lady his hand to go together, but it was still too hot for him to sit in the sun. Then the boys, holding hands, headed for the palace. On the way, the boy reminded the girl not to cry in front of others, otherwise it would seem that the count was forcing her, and he did not intend to play along with the lover. Besides, he decided to find out if the lady thought what he had said in the hall was true. Hannah, about whom so many rumors had been spread, must now look as if she had won. It would be necessary to pretend that the count had fallen in love with his chosen one at first sight. That would be more logical. If her mother thought her daughter was being taken away, she would definitely cry, and Hannah simply didn't need any of that. Listening only to the Lord's judgment, the companion was very grateful for the way the guy cared about her mother's feelings. In fact, the Earl simply hated it when women cried, because they weren't even at war. At the same time, it wasn't a concern. Robin was simply trying to act strategically. Anything was better than mindlessly thrusting his sword into the enemy. After returning home, Sarah decided to talk to Hannah. She wanted to congratulate Her Majesty on her engagement. Sarah is 3 years younger than Hannah. This aristocrat, from a noble family, was born in the fourth palace. She has a very calm and gentle character. Maybe Hannah didn't try to make friends, but in her past life, they weren't close. That same day, the girl decided to apologize to her interlocutor for the fact that she was the one marrying Count Alex. But Hannah immediately explained that she had nothing to apologize for, since it was the Count who chose her. Miss also realized that there were only rumors about the young couple's love, and the lady herself was very happy to become the prince's wife. As the boy said, Sarah must have been surprised by such a sudden proposal, but at the same time, the girl was happy. In fact, Sarah had long dreamed of becoming the wife of someone like an earl. It was a childhood dream. The princess never even imagined that this would happen to her in real life. As soon as the heroine got the information, she immediately did not believe that the lady was in love with the Count. Well, perhaps this outcome of events is even the best. But here's what will happen if Sarah repeats the fate of Hannah in a past life. Unnoticed, their point of discussion, Count Alex, crept up on the lady he wanted to talk to Hannah and suggested doing so alone. As soon as the guys retired to a secluded part of the palace, the first thing Hannah decided to do was congratulate the guy on his wedding and ask him to take care of Sarah. However, Alex didn't want to hear congratulations or the name of his future wife right now. He asked to be congratulated only when he got Hannah back. This sounded extremely strange coming from the guy, since they had already decided in front of the king. However, Alex declared that he would not just give up and asked his companion to just wait. "I will definitely save you, because you belong to me," the confident man said in a frightening voice. Since the Count was drunk, the princess decided to just pretend she hadn't heard anything like that. After that, the girl thought about going back to the guest room. On the way, the lady was met by her future husband, who noticed the intense fear on the woman's face. Robin immediately noticed the girl's anxious look. Behind her stood a guy whose gaze was devouring someone else's bride. Crown Prince Sully was looking at Hannah so intently that it seemed as if he was having some unkind thoughts for the emperor. So Robin decided that he needed to show how to treat a lady. His bride looked boring, so the boy thought, why not have them dance? But at some point, it would be worth asking permission from the owner of the castle. Of course, the king was happy with such a proposal. They, along with the highest nobility, could not possibly miss the dance. Besides, Robin added that dancing alone is boring. It would be better if two newlywed couples danced together. Then it was about Alex and Sarah. Of course, the king was only for it, because he wanted the young people to confirm their union with a dance in their hall. In a second, instrumental music began to play, and the young people merged into a rhythmic dance. At that moment, Hannah understood perfectly well that her husband was just pretending. But for some reason, the girl was still embarrassed. The prince danced much better than she thought. Men from the north had good stamina. No one can even make out who is the enemy in front of the crowd. It would be good if they could show the Count how things are now. But it doesn't seem to work on Alex. He also looks closely at Hannah. Now the Count really understood why Hannah disliked this young man so much. He was a disgusting type, from whom it was better to stay away. The dance continued, and suddenly, the guy thought that he could lift his chosen one and spin her in the air. After that, he let the girl down so abruptly that she accidentally stepped on his feet. In fact, the guy did it on purpose, just wanting to take a closer look at the Lady of the Heart. And although it was all a show for the public, he and the Count looked that day as if they were really young lovers. Other aristocrats noticed how hot the men from the north were. The guests could not help but notice how this guy looked at the lady as if he really loved her. At that very moment, without thinking twice, the guy decided to gently touch the lady's face and kiss her passionately, right in front of everyone. While their lips merged into a passionate kiss, Alex continued to look at the couple attentively. This was a setup to get rid of the annoying prince, which is why all eyes were now focused on the young people, and Hannah's heart seemed to be bursting out of her chest. Everyone around her was shocked that the Northerners were expressing their love so openly. Besides, the other ladies knew that this guy wasn't particularly interested in women, but in real life, he was very active. And long ago, rumors spread about how he invited Princess Hannah to the Western Palace, confirming the theory that the Northern Prince fell in love at first sight. Then the promised marriage ceremony took place. It took place before the god of fire. It was the bark on which the lovers signed and symbolized life force. She intertwines the destinies of the young and leads them on the path of endless blessing. She also opens the gates of love. Listening attentively to the registrar's words, the girl was once again convinced that in this life she would definitely have a child. This time, Hannah promised herself to definitely keep the baby and never lose him. Never. However, during the wedding, her companion noticed how much the bride was shaking. The lady explained that she was just nervous. Now it was time to light the fire sent from above. As soon as the wedding registrar touched the guy's hand, he felt a crazy energy. After that, the man asked to immediately bring the tears of the same god of fire. It was a rather unexpected proposal, as it was unclear why the archives needed to be opened and the sacred religion retrieved. At this time, other people were even concerned that there had been some kind of problem with the ceremony. Based on what he saw, the registrar explained that he simply felt that this person was radiating dark magic. As soon as the employee expressed his opinion, the others were simply shocked, because the prince himself was standing in front of him. How could an evil spirit be in this sacred place? However, the chancellor felt that if dark magic truly resided in Robin's body, this marriage could not take place. All this only made the young knight laugh. It was the first time the boy had encountered rumors so absurdly. At that very moment, Hannah noticed, like the boy Al, a special magical thing. The count assured that this marriage was no different from the homage of the defeated country of Sally to the country of Trick. He also noted that the boys might regard the break of the engagement as an evasion of responsibility for the war. However, the registrar continued to assure that the tears of the fire, God would clarify everything. The employee poured holy water directly on the count's face because he knew that when this holy water and dark energy collided, soot would appear and the result would be on the face. After all, since the wedding registrar received the almighty willpower of the fire god, he had not made a single mistake. However, this time, he still went astray. The guy turned out to be absolutely clean. Robin knew nothing about such mistakes. But he was sure that diplomatically, the chancellor would have to take responsibility, at the very least, for his disrespectful behavior towards the young groom. The wedding attendant, in turn, continued to disbelieve what was happening, considering it all simply impossible. However, how much more humiliation was he going to subject Robin to? Now the count would like to end this whole ceremony as soon as possible. After what happened, in the office of the Western Palace, Robin told his chief assistant Evan what happened at the wedding ceremony. From that day, it was also known that King Berets had donated 500,000 gold coins. Then the chief announced that today we must leave the kingdom of Sally, despite the fact that it was only the first night. The wedding registrar beat the knight so badly that it was the only reason the boy had such a strong desire to escape from here. At the same time, in reality, the man was hiding something from everyone. His hand was literally dripping with blood, but it was still better than soot on his face. After all, Robin knew that those who worshipped a god for a long time had a special sensitivity to evil spirits, and this holy servant noticed the count's condition. The very thing Robin was clutching at that moment literally saved the man's reputation, all because the knight had been preparing for such an outcome of events, and had long since begun to always carry an owl with him. The count had cut his finger and absorbed the energy, thanks to which he was not detected. The Lord knew that it was impossible to reveal the secrets of the royal family, which is why the knight suggested leaving today. However, the assistant also reminded him that he needed to meet with the king before the trip. And although it wasn't that important right now, it was still worth considering what to do with the hereditary princess. The next day, Hannah told her mother that she was leaving Sally with her husband the next day. She had guessed it would happen so soon, since it was obvious that the prince was offended by the incident at the wedding ceremony. After such humiliation from the chancellor, tomorrow's county was not a strange event at all. But today, Mother would be able to be with her daughter for the last time. Hannah would, of course, have liked to spend more time with her mother before she left. But there was nothing she could do. Now the lady could only promise that everything would be okay. That same day, the mother decided to give the most precious thing to her daughter. It was something her brother had given her a long time ago. Mom had been promised that this potion would allow her to gain His Majesty's favor, but the woman had never had the courage to use it. At that moment, Miss remembered that when she married Alex in a past life, her mother had also given her this jewel. In addition, the queen said to use the potion if her husband's attitude towards Anna did not change. A few months after their wedding, Alex lost all interest in his wife, and in desperation, Hannah used a potion to win his love back. Thanks to this, the main character of this story had a child, but since then, she has never been able to share the same bed with him. Now, the lady considered the moment most appropriate to thank her mother for everything she asked the woman not to worry about her, promising to become a true princess of the empire and serve the prince. Soon the women hugged goodbye and promised to write letters to each other, and then the lady went out. All the inhabitants of Sally gathered in the castle courtyard, but Prince Robin still did not come out. Before the lady and her husband left, the king asked her not to forget who she was. After all, her husband gave Hannah to the kingdom of Trick in return for the world. From now on, the princess must take on a role in achieving peace between the two countries. In turn, Hannah promised to try her best. At that moment, the girl noticed that in difficult moments of separation, her husband ultimately remained primarily a king, and not a loving father. Then the emperor shared that the prince had left yesterday. It seemed he was still angry after that incident, because Dad had asked the lady to try to calm her husband down. It was time to leave. But before Miss got into the carriage, Lady Sarah also decided to chat with an acquaintance. Frankly, Sarah had not thought that they would be parted so soon, and if the other princess had more courage, they would have talked more sooner. Honestly, Sarah always wanted to be friends with Hannah, to get to know the better girl. But now, what saddened Sarah most was that the young ladies might never see each other again. As silly as it may sound, ladies can still be friends, even at a distance. Moreover, at least writing each other letters in the real world is quite possible. The sisters decided to hug one last time and promised each other again to meet again someday. And now it was time to say goodbye. On the way to the northern castle, the personal assistant, Sophia, simply couldn't stop crying before leaving. Hannah told Sophia to stay at Sally's, but the maid refused. As a result, seeing her bitter tears, Hannah gave in and allowed her to go with her. But on the way to the new house, the lady also continued to cry. Now she cried because the prince had disappointed her. Sophia simply could not imagine how the groom dared to abandon his bride on their wedding night. Even if he was angry, this was no excuse. But Hannah was still surprised why the maid was so sad, because from the very beginning, the marriage was concluded only for the sake of peace between the countries, and the maid knew it for sure. But the assistant noticed how tenderly the prince treated the lady, with such love. And now, just the other night, he behaved so callously. In fact, for the main character of this story, it was enough just to be free from Alex. That's why that day the lady admitted that she should thank her husband for at least a drop of kindness shown. And even if he continued to treat the girl coldly, it would be her punishment for Sally's crimes. During a carriage ride, looking out the window at the beautiful scenery, the girl suddenly noticed a guy she already knew. It was indeed Evan, her husband's assistant. It turned out that Prince Robin had asked the guard to deliver something to his wife. Meanwhile, in the county, Alex was informed that Robin was indeed not with the messenger, and that only Princess Hannah had traveled in the carriage. The guards had heard that the prince had stopped at the Viscount's estate in the nearby town of Drew. In parallel, as soon as the lady's carriage stopped, Evan first asked to be allowed to familiarize the lady with the schedule. Soon they would have to come across the canal and enter the territory of Trick, but they would have to travel all night. They should definitely rest. His Majesty had arrived in the territory of a neighboring city, and they would stay there for one day. The aide reported that the prince had apologized for having to leave early due to urgent matters. Or rather, he had fainted before he had time to leave the message, and Evan had to make up an explanation for his superior. But the princess didn't need to know that. Hannah was now certain that the prince had only gone because he was angry, and yet she was grateful that the count had sent an assistant to convey this information. As they had said before, Hannah was soon to board a boat at a certain town and continue on her way. The castle of the neighboring kingdom looked truly magical. Could it be that His Majesty Robin lives here? First of all, as soon as the guests arrived on the territory of this kingdom, the owner of the estate greeted them with a warm welcome. Immediately afterwards, the princess thanked him for the greetings and asked where His Majesty was now, as she wanted to meet her husband. Then Evan announced to Viscount Drew that everyone was terribly tired, and therefore suggested postponing the reception until later, after which the man promised to arrange for a delicious meal to be prepared for the boys. However, the girl then wondered whether His Majesty would come to dinner. The girl did not yet know for sure whether he had finished with his business. Only then did Evan decide to share something with the princess. The knight said that His Majesty had accidentally drunk poison and fainted. The boy explained that, probably, it was all the work of Empress Trick. His Majesty was in trouble with his half-brothers. Fortunately, Robin's servants had used the antidote immediately, and his life was no longer in danger, but it would still take time for the man to recover. All this meant was that yesterday the boys had only pretended that the man had simply left because of the incident, so that no one in Sally would recognize him. Evan also reported that after His Majesty was brought here, they tried to join him as soon as possible, and then the knight apologized to the future heiress. Now the assistant explained that the lord needed peace, so that night the newlyweds should sleep separately. Evan also asked to keep what they said a secret. What she heard truly shocked the main character of this story. Such a strong person was affected by poison. Who would have thought that something like this could even happen? After dinner at Drew Castle, Hannah went to her room and was getting ready for bed. As Sophia combed her hair, the girl decided to ask her mistress if her lord had seen His Majesty, since the boy hadn't even come to dinner. Hannah reminded her that she had to keep everything a secret from Sophia, so she decided to tell the girl that the gentleman was very busy today, so he was probably having dinner in his office. But it seems that Sophia did not like this answer at all, because it was the wedding night, and the newlyweds ate separately from each other. They also slept in different beds, which from the outside might seem like something extremely outrageous. Although Hannah tried to convey to the maid that the prince was busy and should not be disturbed. And yet, stubborn Sophia decided to sleep outside just in case, because suddenly His Majesty would appear in the bedroom to his wife. Although such pressure from the girl only made the lady laugh. If the maid was going to act such an independent person, then the prince would definitely turn around and then go to another room. Hannah couldn't tell Sophia about the poison, but she felt that as long as her assistant was there, everything would be fine. Now the girl could only hope that this time Sophia would have a wonderful life in the north. As soon as the lady started to fall asleep, she felt someone lift her up tightly and put her directly on his shoulder by the grip. They quickly realized that it was strong male hands that grabbed the girl. "Shut up, or I'll cut your throat," the man said threateningly. As soon as the miss tried to scream, the man slipped past the guard so quickly and ran away. This man clearly knows the area well, but why did he kidnap the girl? Where is he taking Hannah? Surveying the area, the lady soon realized that they were heading towards the forest, and that no one would find her in that area. So the girl immediately decided that she had to give some kind of sign. She threw the ribbon that was holding her hair straight onto the floor, while the criminal didn't see anything. A second later, His Majesty the Emperor opened his eyes. He was finally able to regain consciousness. Evan, who had been watching the boss closely, reported that the boy had been in a coma for 2 days. The assistant also announced that the rest of the people had arrived yesterday as planned. At the same time, the man said that he was not at all worried about the princess, since the lady was now only compensation for the war. But just at that moment, the young men heard the screams of the princess's maid. They were tearful cries for help. Sophia reported that Mrs. Hannah had disappeared. The maids had been ordered to keep their mouths shut about the disappearance of Miss. Now the warrior asked His Majesty if they should form a search party. They had 30 knights to accompany them, if they took at least 10 of them, that is, a chance of finding Her Majesty quickly. However, Robin had already decided to go alone. This decision, of course, did not please the boy's chief assistant, because His Majesty had just woken up, and now he was already going to get involved in a crime. However, Robin himself understood that if the knights went out to search, rumors would start. It would be easier for him to deal with this alone, despite the fact that Evan assured the Lord that the ladies would quickly notice, since 2 people had disappeared. At the same time, Robin understood that other rumors could spread. Therefore, in case of need, the Lord ordered the knight to simply say that he and the princess had gone on a honeymoon. Besides, he and the princess had already done something naughty in Sally's, so other people would definitely believe this theory. Then the chief ordered them to head west, to the neighboring city of Tyre, and in 3 days they were to meet in Hawk. However, the assistant thought it was simply impossible that a man could find the princess and travel all the way to the neighboring kingdom in 3 days. But Robin was absolutely confident in his abilities. Now a man must make the impossible possible. After all, he knew that one of them was to blame, either the freak Alex or the damn third prince. If Ruby failed the mission, he would bring discord between the 2 nations, and then this snotty, along with his mother, would finish him off. The more time they waste now, the higher the chance that the princess will not be saved. It is necessary to identify her before death. Therefore, the master ordered the chief assistant to contact the organization nearby and find out who is behind this evil. Ever since the banner was stolen, the man has been haunted by a strange feeling. They tried to get him into a conflict with Sally, but it didn't work. This time, he's being accused of the princess's disappearance. It's always the same. After his mother's death, the new empress brought with her a son older than Robin, providing irrefutable evidence that the emperor had been having an affair on the side even before the boy's mother died. The half-brother took the place of the crown prince. He wanted to take away everything that belonged to Robin. After the knight was cast away, that was his position in it now, and he too was about to have everything taken from him and then thrown away without any regret. But now Robin decided that he would never let that happen again. It was so cold that day that the main character of this story felt like she was going to freeze to death. Moreover, considering that they were riding north, it was not difficult to guess that the lady was being taken to the Trick Empire. At that moment, the Miss thought about the fact that the kidnapper was a person from the Empire. In Robin's past life, there were many disputes about the succession to the throne. Could it be the first or third prince behind this? Of course, it's entirely possible. Within seconds, a stern voice ordered the lady to descend, then announced how glad he was to see the princess again. From that voice alone, it was clear that Alex was involved. "Didn't I tell you, Hannah? I'll find you anywhere," confirmed the familiar silhouette of the hated boy, who suddenly appeared on the horizon. Besides, Alex was openly glad that Prince Robin hadn't touched the lady yet, because she definitely belonged to the emperor. Feeling all this atmosphere, hearing this tone, the lady understood where they were now. This was Mount Nun, the place where the lady had been killed in her past life. Despair was so overwhelming that Hannah's emotions were so overwhelming that she simply burst into tears. Cruel fate was about to end her life again. Is the main character of this story really destined to be a prisoner of this terrible man? And her child will never be born again. The lady was not going to leave it all just like that. Now she decided to run away. This time, Hannah wanted to change the course of fate in her favor. However, of course, she didn't manage to escape very far. Alex's assistants immediately caught the girl, firmly grabbing her arms and preventing her from escaping. After the Count approached the Chosen One, he noticed injuries on her delicate skin. This greatly angered the master, as he asked his servants to be more careful with her and not to harm her. Due to aggression, the man simply could not stand it and struck a fatal blow to his servant. "You must have been scared, but there's no other way," the cruel Count said immediately after the murders. Moreover, the guy noticed that his assistant not only injured the girl, but also set his sights on something that belonged only to him. Hannah's body. Alex believed that he simply could not leave this guy alive. After stealing the princess, Alex personally took the girl to his castle. Now he assumed that no one would find them there, and even saw a bit of a romantic atmosphere in this. In fact, the guy was just crazy. Then the beauty decided to ask what was going on with Sarah, since Alex was married to Her Majesty. But in response, the rude blonde only promised the lady that she had nothing to worry about, and he would take care of it all himself. In addition, the prince was now looking forward to their wedding night with Hannah. Alex still behaved like a lustful monster, literally every second remembering that he would not let that boy, the Knight Robin, take his bride. Indeed, the prince acted as if he had completely lost his mind. After all, Hannah's marriage is a kind of contract concluded between two countries. An empire does not just impose it. However, the man had already stopped listening to his companion, only placing special emphasis on how much the girl's feet were frozen. After all, the guy did not want to spend their wedding night hanging over a cold body. At that moment, the lady was already convinced that the empire had wanted this theft in the first place, or so Alex had put it. This meant that he had kidnapped the lady on the orders of the top people of the empire. As it was known, Alex's position was precarious. He was often a pawn in the affairs of the imperial family, and the unit commander stole the Holy All. If it was true then, the captain was acting on orders from the empire during the theft. But thanks to experience and her past life, Hannah caught him much earlier. However, the man no longer felt nauseous and pounced directly on the poor girl's body, wanting to begin the process of passionate seclusion. Now, without his companion's consent, he longed to warm her with the warmth of his body. At this time, Emperor Robin was so desperate that he decided to use the method of referring the Dark Raven. As much as he wanted not to do so, there was no other choice now. The guy gave the bird all and ordered it to go to the same place, after which the raven had to return to its master in time. Magic stones absorb dark energy. The further away the stone is from Robin, the stronger it will be. From a young age, the boy was guided by the instincts of the beast. His feelings intensified with each passing year. An ordinary person would never be able to detect a subtle trail of scent, but Robin can easily find his enemy. Meanwhile, in Alex's castle, the guy still continued to forcibly hold the lady, no longer able to restrain himself from touching the beauty's body. Unfortunately, in this situation, the girl could not even do anything, but even then, she did not want to let the unpleasant guy even touch her with a finger. All Hannah could think of at that moment was to verbally change the situation slightly. She gently addressed Alex by name and explained that she didn't like it because it all felt like violence. Lady pointed out that the young people seemed to have drifted apart because of her father, but she knew how much he loved her. Miss pointed out that she wanted tender and warm embraces, like those of lovers, and then she could warm herself in them. After listening carefully to the girl, Alex had to agree with her. He even realized that he wouldn't want to spend their first night like that. Afterwards, the girl noticed that she looked absolutely awful because of the situation, and so she announced that she wanted to wash up and change into new clothes. In fact, at that moment, Hannah was just stalling for time, stalling as best she could. Alex, surprisingly, believed everything the girl said, and even promised to prepare everything for her comfort. He sent all the servants away from the estate so that they would not interfere. So it was necessary to wait a while until the man himself drew water for the bath. The man's huge mistake was that he still left the lady alone. As soon as the guy left the room, the girl immediately ran to the window, because she understood that this was the perfect time to escape from here and in any way and gain some time. She quickly understood and made one large flagellum out of the curtains, which she threw down and was about to jump from the balcony. Well, as soon as the girl was on the other side of the room, the guy immediately noticed her and immediately headed to the balcony to forcefully hold the deaf lady in the air. Then he brought the child back into the bedroom and immediately asked the terrifying question of what the girl was trying to do now. Not receiving an answer, the guy decided to ask her how she dared to lie to his face so brazenly. Now Alex's anger had become so strong that he was ready to kill the lady with his own hands. "You are only a damn half-breed. The blood of a servant flows in you. This is your gratitude for my love?" The gentleman was already shouting how much he didn't like the way the girl first rejected him and then laughed at him. At the same time, To make it clear what a mistake the miss had made, the guy said that if she became his wife, he would treat her like a princess. But now the man believed that the lady was his mistress. Although she was not, he even suggested that she had become just a girl of easy behavior who should know her place. At that moment, the man noticed a scratch on the woman's face. Since he hated scars, he decided to treat the cut, not wanting to see the lady in such a state. But before leaving the room again, he let her know that if she deceived him again, her first night would be a living nightmare. The lady was now so frightened that she really didn't have the strength to even think about running away. Meanwhile, Robin had already found the chilled corpse of Alex's assistant. Looking at the body of that guard, Sally, it was easy to come to the unfortunate conclusion that enough time had passed since his death. At the same time, the gentleman smelled a strong scent of his girlfriend. Her scent was most strongly emanating from that house. Based on the recognition, Robin clearly knew where his wife was. However, the problem was that Al was now too far from Robin. The energy flow was disrupted. The Count simply could not lose control right now. As soon as Alex discovered the scratch on the girl's face, he decided to go to the castle to get medicine. At the same time, he threatened the guests that if she tried to escape again, he would break all her legs so that the lady would not be able to walk at all. But Hannah herself at that moment seriously thought, if Alex continues to destroy her like this, will a real man, Robin, accept his girlfriend after this? If the lady becomes his slave, she will live an even worse life than the past. But first of all, it was not worth thinking about that now. We had to find a way to get out. The frightened beauty did not give up. She decided to look around the room and look for something that could help her escape. Then the lady picked up a small iron stick that was standing in the corner. Now the girl decided to stand behind the door so that as soon as Alex appeared, she could give him a hard time. But the only strange thing was that the door did not open with keys. In a second, the front door was simply broken open. Fortunately for Hannah, an image of Robin, who had specifically infiltrated the castle, appeared in the room. The lady was so happy and grateful to her husband for appearing in that damn house at the best moment that she ran up to the guy and hugged him tightly. Immediately afterwards, the guy, surprisingly, felt quite strange, and then he reported that the girl was going overboard. The missus apologized and explained that she was just glad to see him here. Who would have thought that everything would happen like this? Now there was an ugly scratch on the girl's face. But now was not the time to think about the injustice of life. So first, the mister suggested getting out of here. Since Alex had taken the girl's shoes, Robin took the lady in his arms and led her towards the exit. But as soon as the guy crossed the border of the bedroom with the lady in his arms, he immediately met his enemy, Alex. After a short struggle, the owner of the palace immediately decided to take out his sword to attack the unexpected guest. And although Robin knew that Alex was completely out of his mind, even a lunatic wouldn't dare raise his hand against royal blood. Now Robin also intended to fight this impudent man. But only at this moment did the knight notice the presence of guards in this palace. Then he ordered the Lady of the Heart to stay here and not go anywhere, and he himself moved closer to his enemy. Alex immediately explained that the knights would arrive here soon and asked to return Hannah to him. Only then did the impudent promise to save Robin's life. In response, the guest only asked how the brazen man dared to kidnap the poor girl. But Alex thought that now was not the best time to talk, so he ordered Hannah to be returned to him first, and then they would talk. But Robin didn't want to do that at all, so he was the first to jump into a sword fight with Prince Sully. Since the knight was an excellent swordsman, he easily struck the blonde first. As soon as Alex's hand came into contact with the sharp blade of the knife, Robin decided to ask the man who had given him such an order in the first place. It was clear that Alex was really afraid for his health, because now in front of him stood an experienced knight who was excellent with weapons, and yet Alex was not going to give up so easily. Besides, the guy remembered that the knights should be here soon. The man should just hold out and bide his time. Robin, of course, noticed how Alex planned to wait for his people, but he wasn't going to let the guy do that. Besides, all 11 people dressed in dark robes had already been killed by Robin. The guy had dealt with each of them on the way here. In fact, they had completely accidentally fallen into the warrior's hands. They were just unlucky that day. Well, now it's time for Alex to answer who ordered him. As it turned out, it was Prince Kylo. The boy admitted that he was only following the man's instructions. Who knew that a brother from the Trick family would turn out to be so cruel? Even after Robin learned the whole truth about his brother's dirty order, the guy decided not to leave Alex unpunished. So he dealt the final blow with his sword to the brazen man for daring to touch someone else's wife. A few minutes later, the girl decided to go downstairs, as she noticed the dead silence on the first floor. As soon as she arrived at the place, she saw a completely unpleasant picture of beatings. Then, her chosen one took off the boots from the exhausted body of his competitor and handed them to the girl. The lady would have to put on these shoes, because she would have to walk for some time. As the victim put on her boots, she decided to inquire about Alex's pale body. Of course, Robin hadn't killed the poor guy, and there was no point in worrying about it now. They had enough trouble with the ladies being kidnapped. Now it was time to go back. For all her kindness, even after the kidnapping, Miss felt the need to ask her companion if it would be okay if they left Alex's bloody body in this position. In fact, Robin would like to kill him, but the man does not deserve such an easy death. It seems that Alex is connected to a much greater evil, more specifically, with the snakes of the Empire. The prince said that his father blamed him for failing to protect the family himself and put all the blame on the boy. He would clearly find 101 reasons why Robin failed the peacekeeping mission. But yes, Robin is like that, and even he doesn't deny it. And that guy won't be able to go and tell everyone the truth. At the same time, to dilute the situation, the man decided to point out how much stronger his wife really is than she seemed. At that moment, Miss wanted to either just knock Alex out with that thing or finish him off altogether. The knight immediately realized that the heroine had much more strength than she thought. After all, the lady had gone through all this and not even shed a single tear. Such behavior of a fragile, seemingly aristocratic woman was truly admirable. Finally, Robin's servants arrived. Evan reported that they had followed the signs, but since they were in a hurry, they had not taken much with them. Unfortunately, there was no horse for Hannah, and it would be a long walk to the cart. But even so, Robin refused to bring an extra horse. Then the young man gently lifted his wife into his arms and placed her on the horse. Then he asked Evan to find clothes and shoes for her. And then the man sat right in front of the lady because he learned that she did not know how to ride. The master asked the girl to grab him from behind and warned him that they would jump quickly, so they had to hold on tight, or else, God forbid, the silly girl would fall on the way. The guys were driving really fast. At one point, Hannah was even afraid that she would fall. She was shaking so much on the road. But at that moment, her companion thought only about the fact that the animal's sensitivity still hadn't subsided. The more the girl rubbed against him, the stronger his passionate desire became. To divert attention, the young man decided to have a little talk with the lady. He began by telling her the news. As soon as they returned to the palace, the girl should learn to ride a horse. As soon as the boys reached the carriage, the boy decided to take a nap in the cabin. He fell asleep so soundly that the lady even thought of giving her her blanket and covering him. Besides, the man had been looking for her all night and was very tired. But as soon as the lady tried to do this, he immediately woke up and threw her hand back, asking her not to do anything stupid and to sit quietly. At that moment, Miss noticed how much harder his breathing had become, so she decided to ask the man if everything was okay. Because of his condition, Robin could not sit quietly next to the girl, but he could not tell her about it either. Besides, he knew that getting out of the carriage would not be the best option, because if he moved, everything would only get worse. Only then did the lady decide to touch the gentleman's skin, and in an instant she felt the heat burning his body. In addition, the lady also noticed a pulsation right in the man's groin area. At this point, the atmosphere was so awkward that the girl decided to change the subject and ask the guy how he found her. As it turned out, Robin did it with the help of her ribbon, which was hanging from a branch. The beauty's plan worked. During the kidnapping, she deliberately threw the ribbon, hoping that someone would notice her. At that moment, the miss also unexpectedly asked to stop the carriage and suggested a little walk, because she had not forgotten how the man had rushed off in search of her, and a whole day had already passed. And the girl knew that the man must have been very tired while he was looking for the lady. Therefore, they should stop and rest in a warm place. After arriving at the nearest hotel, Evan and his assistants, grabbing the prince by the shoulders, pulled him into the room. It was clear how exhausted the young man was now. But he did not even intend to call a servant, only asked the knight to tell the employee that they would be delayed. The heat was so intense that the girl simply did not know what to do. All that came to her mind at that moment was to wipe his body with a cold towel. However, before she could even do that, the guy ordered the girl to leave his room. At this time, with each breath, the man felt her scent more and more strongly and seemed to be going crazy. And the girl, as if by evil, still did not intend to leave his room, but on the contrary, wanted to touch the man to help him take off his clothes. The smell of his wife so strongly attracted the gentleman that he could not stand it anymore, and with all his might, but at the same time with special tenderness and passion, he threw the girl right onto the bed. "If you try to undress me now, you won't be able to leave the room so easily. There is no teasing of a hungry beast inside me," the man explained in a more menacing tone. And before, it seemed like he had nothing to do with Hannah's body. But what had changed so dramatically? The girl assumed that all this could only be because of poison. Nevertheless, the man continued to order the girl to leave his chambers. Otherwise, it would be worse for her. Only the lady decided in her own way, after which the princess gently put her arms around the boy's shoulders and then hugged the man with her whole body. After all, she could not forget how he had saved her from the clutches of a ruthless aristocrat. But it was only to preserve the peaceful alliance between the countries. The young lady believed that His Majesty probably had no feelings for her, but despite all this, the beauty, without knowing why, felt that His Majesty was very excited right now. Therefore, the lady decided to take advantage of this moment and hug the guy tightly. Then she reminded him that she was his wife, and moreover, had promised to fulfill all her duties earlier. The lady explained that if the man wanted, he could do anything he wanted with her. Not a second passed before their lips merged in a passionate, ardent kiss. However, even in such a vulnerable moment, the man controlled himself and understood that he simply could not give in to instinct to take over right now. Otherwise, if he does this, innocent blood will be shed, and then he will once again become the beast that everyone fears so much. The man understood that he should immediately try to push the girl away from him, but his body seemed to be disobeying him. At that moment, his restless soul seemed to regain peace. What was that feeling? The prince had never felt so warm and pleasant before. The aroma of her body engulfed him from head to toe. And how pleasant it was for a man to feel all this. But why he felt so good now, he could never explain to himself. At that moment, the lady noticed that the man had calmed down a bit. Then she suggested that they go to the bathroom together first. Then the wife realized that they had neither eaten anything and therefore could ask for something to be prepared while they washed themselves. Robin used to try to avoid talking to girls, thinking it would make him look even more like an animal. But now, strangely enough, he doesn't feel that way. So that evening, he had no problem accepting his wife's offer of a contract. Soon the bath was ready. But in reality, usually mercenaries or assassins stay here for the night, so there is no screen here. None of the guests need it. The guy explained that he did not want to complicate the situation, so he did not tell the owners who they really were. Then he asked the noblewoman to get into the bath first until the water cooled down. At that moment, the lady really thought that she should just leave, since it was embarrassing to be near a naked guy, although she turned away. But as soon as the girl thought about leaving the bath, the guy openly asked for her help, and the girl herself said at first that she needed to sit in the bath too. That's why the man suggested saving time and spending time together. Moreover, there was nothing strange about this, because it is part of the newlyweds' marital duties. No matter how embarrassed the girl was, she knew that there was nothing wrong with it, because she wanted to have a baby as soon as possible. So it was better to do it now, while she was still attracted to her body. Therefore, the girl had already started to undress to prepare for swimming together. Only the sensations inside the man at that moment were extremely unusually strange, although every centimeter of her body had already been studied. But now everything felt different. Before the lady undressed completely, the guy loudly announced that he had changed his mind and asked to leave the room. The knight argued that it was their wedding night, after all, and spending it in a hotel would be a bit awkward. In fact, it was the first time he had felt such feelings. They were extremely strange feelings of embarrassment. The awkward situation continued to gain momentum, and at that very moment, Robert was forced to suggest that the girls sleep separately today and spend the first night in the palace. The lady herself at that moment had the feeling that he was trying to avoid her, although at first it seemed to her that a moment ago he had been aroused. But suddenly his mood changed. The young lady understood that if he lost interest in her body and she missed her chance, she would not know how long she would have to wait. So the beauty decided to declare that she was completely comfortable and continued to take off her clothes. Once she had completely exposed her body, she informed her husband that he could do whatever he wanted with her, wherever he wanted, whenever his heart desired. As she sank into the warm bath, the girl consoled herself that this intimacy would not be as difficult as she had imagined. And besides, in a past life, she had already been pregnant. As soon as their bodies were a few centimeters apart, the guy immediately took the lady by force to press her to him and kiss her passionately. Rough, forceful, his touches were not at all like Alex's. Unlike Alex, Prince Trick's hands were touching a woman's body for the first time. But for some reason, it was in his awkward hands that Hannah's body seemed to melt. During intimacy, the guy said that he didn't want to do it here because it was too cramped, and he was afraid of hurting the lady's fragile body. That's why he suggested continuing everything on the bed. Only before leaving, it was necessary to wipe the water. However, the young people only took a step towards the room, and then the guy could not restrain himself and continued his passionate kisses on the princess's lips, smoothly descending to her neck. When the newlyweds were in bed, the girl still did not completely stop being afraid of her partner and did not fully trust him. And although the lady had already been through this in a past life, and she understood that here, as with Alex, she just had to close her eyes and suffer, she still could not restrain herself from the desire to push her husband away. The girl frankly admitted that she was a little afraid. Then the guy just asked her to tell him as soon as she felt any pain. It seems that at that moment, his wife was convinced that everything was really okay, so together they continued the night. The next morning, Robin brought the lady breakfast in bed. It was time to eat and hit the road. At that moment, the young man noticed bruises on the girl's neck and a cut on her cheek. In order not to scare her husband, the modest woman explained that this was all the work of Duke Alex. But the rest, namely the passionate love-sucking, was done by His Majesty. Last night, the guy was so passionately taking his lady by force that he even told her to endure as long as possible before the finale. Even at breakfast, the man still couldn't get their night together out of his head. He didn't really want to go crazy and throw himself at her like that, but it seemed like something in his head had gone haywire. As before, the knight believed that all this had happened only because instinct had taken over, and yet Robin couldn't help but think that it was a completely different feeling. It wasn't like the feeling a predator gets when it pounces on its prey. It was more like floating in the clouds. It was so warm and pleasant that Robin wanted to repeat it and know what he felt then. During breakfast, Robin also decided to share his meat with his wife. Since vegetables alone would not keep you full for long, the food at this hotel was indeed not very good, but it was still better than starving. But once they arrived at the palace, the newlyweds would not have to worry about food. Although Robin had warned his companion at first that the cuisine there was a little different from Sally's, most likely the girl would find it a bit unusual. And to be honest, Robin had also found it quite difficult to eat all this time in someone else's palace. Trick loves smoked meat, and when it is smoked, the taste intensifies. While discussing such nuances of nutrition, the guy noticed how much this morning resembled the morning of newlyweds. They are, of course, not exactly a couple, but last night turned out to be even much better than the main character of this story thought, although at first she was very scared. Despite the rumors, the lady was convinced that her husband did not look cruel at all, but on the contrary, even cute in some moments. After the girl finished her breakfast, she had to get ready because the boys were leaving soon. But before they thought of leaving, Robin suggested repeating the success of last night and doing it again. Then the boy confessed that yesterday he had restrained himself so that the lady could get some sleep, but now he could take his time. Later, the boys were already sitting in the carriage. To be honest, it was really not that easy for the sweet lady to sit that day after everything that had happened between them that hot night. Fortunately, the husband noticed his wife's discomfort, so he even asked the coachman to slow down a bit, even though the Count had a lot of business and was always in a hurry. However, the guy explained that in any case, they had decided to meet in Hock tomorrow, so they could take their time, and if it was leisurely, they could go to the palace separately. The man explained that he had warned Evan in advance about the change of plans. But at that moment, it seems that the heroine was only interested in the maid Sophia, who would probably be very scared. Truth be told, no other princess would take care of her maid as much as Hannah does. The young man explained that the young lady should stop talking nonsense and go to sleep as soon as possible, and to ensure the comfort of his wife, the young man tilted her head a little and placed it on his shoulder so that the lady would quickly close her eyes in anticipation of dreams. It seems that the Count is a little sweet after all, at least in such vulnerable moments. A few hours later, the carriage with His Royal Highness, the Prince and Princess, arrived at the Kingdom of Hock. There they were met by Evan and Sophia. It was clear how much the maid missed her mistress. She literally hugged the princess tightly. Meanwhile, Evan treated His Majesty with extreme seriousness. The knight even announced that he had something to convey to his superior. It was not a woman's talk, so the commander retired with his employee. It was also that Evan could confirm the assumption that this was the work of the third prince. The knight said that it turned out that a group of mercenaries who were in Drew had received money from the imperial family. They kidnapped the princess, but now all Robin can do is turn a blind eye. There is no other way out now. They can't call Alex as a witness. Even if the squad escorts the Lord to the palace, he will be able to give proper testimony. And on the plus side, if the man tells everything as it is, he will be accused of conflict with the Duke and Sally. If this is made public, the situation will not turn in the man's favor. Moreover, Prince Robin knew that all the aristocrats would be glad of the death of the heir to the throne. But things turned out much better than Robin had imagined. At least, it was about the bravery of his companion, who could have perfectly stood up for her own safety. When the topic of conversation turned to the girl, Evan decided to express his curiosity about whether the man's chance to win the woman's heart had been wasted. The knight indicated that the gentleman had held back due to poor health, but it quickly became apparent that this was not the case, as the man had to rush through his wedding night. Then the gentleman admitted that he had taken the photo in order to dazzle the girl, but several events had occurred. After that, the guy did not begin to explain everything in detail with nuances, and only ordered to drive on. Meanwhile, Lady Hannah was already sitting in the carriage with her assistant, Sophia. The girl, as before, could not stop thinking about the passionate night with her contract husband. Her partner, Count Robin, was also not left with such mischievous thoughts. At the same time, the man seriously thought about how it is worth only demonic energy to take possession of him, so immediately, in place of common sense, only animal instincts remain. Of course, from childhood, the girls and even family members tried to keep all kinds of ladies away from their son. To tell the truth, the guy himself never thought he would ever be able to live a normal family life, and never even imagined it. And yet, the man didn't want to give himself false hope. After all, the young man, as before, believed that, most likely, the Lady of the Heart would still be afraid of him and try to avoid him. So he decided for himself that it was better not to feel any feelings at first. At the same time, the older knight also knew that he needed at least one heir. But beyond that, he wasn't going to talk to his wife or even touch her. And now things weren't going according to plan, and there was no guarantee that everything would be okay. If he wasn't lucky, Robin could tear his own wife apart himself. And now the most important thing is to give birth to an heir and not feel any feelings for each other. Robin constantly thought about this and tried not to forget that all these games with feelings were the conditions of their marriage. Soon the boys were in the capital of the empire. The imperial palace looked quite impressive. It was completely different from what the heroine had seen in Sally. Her home would never compare to this luxurious estate. Looking at the architecture of the castle alone, the girl first of all wondered how brave Sally was to decide to interfere in the affairs of such a country. The lady could assume that most likely these were those precious ores on the mountain. On that terrible mountain, where in a past life the girl had lost her child. Thinking about the injustice of fate, the young lady even wondered if it was on that day, that passionate night, that she could have become pregnant. But her thoughts were interrupted by her husband, who asked her to stop the carriage for a moment. As it turned out, the young man decided to ask the maid to take her out and take her by another route to the castle. As soon as the newlyweds were alone, the young man decided to discuss a few nuances. First of all, he reminded them that he had told the other aristocrats that the reason for their late return was their honeymoon. So, the man explained that it would be better if they entered the capital together. He also asked them to pretend that they were burning with passion and endless love for each other. Since Robin was very vocal in his proposal to the girl and Sally, everyone thought he had feelings for his wife. That's why the guy suggested that they act like they were a perfect couple, at least play it until they met the emperor. Of course, the girl sitting opposite had to agree to this decree, but before getting out of the carriage, Robin also asked her to understand everything correctly. That is, not to mistake his game for true love. After her husband's recommendations, the girl wondered if he had been kind to her that evening, only because he was in a good mood. Now the girl was absolutely sure that he would not pay any attention to her beyond the limits of the negotiated contract. Before getting out of the carriage, the girl was also forced to cover her face before arriving. This is because she simply could not go out like this. Anyone could see the wounds on her face, and if someone else saw it, they might think something wrong. So the menacing-looking man decided to hand over a small box. As soon as the girl opened the box, her eyes were caught by the sparkling stones on the beautiful piece of jewelry. It was a luxurious necklace. Robin simply thought that it would be a good idea to hide the bruises on her neck, so he asked Evan to buy just such a piece of jewelry. Judging by the heroine's reaction, the guy was convinced that girls really like such accessories, and then asked the lady to try it on to make sure it covered everything. As soon as Hannah put the necklace on, it really looked incredibly beautiful on her neck. But at that moment, the girl wondered if she should return the jewelry after meeting the king, so she decided to ask the man directly. Although the question was really inappropriate, of course, it was a gift. Immediately after, the interlocutor asked her to keep her mouth shut, because she had enough without any problems. The boys followed along the crowned path, while the boy presented his wife Hannah to Her Majesty. The first thing the aristocrats noticed was that the lady was wearing a veil. As soon as the husband noticed this, he decided to explain that his wife was embarrassed to show her face to strangers, so she covered it. After all, no one really knew that this was all done only to hide the unnecessary abrasions on the lady's face and neck. The queen generally considered such an act a violation of etiquette, as if the girl was ignorant of the imperial family, and therefore demanded that the veil be removed. But at that moment, her companion gently grabbed the girl's shoulder, making it clear that she should not do anything she did not want to do herself. As you can see, I cannot control my strength. I think my wife will be embarrassed, so please allow me to leave the veil, the heir asked the next moment. This statement only made his parents laugh. And yet, the most important thing is that the father allowed the girl not to take off her jewelry. Then the king remembered how he fought on the battlefield to protect the kingdom of Trick. And now that the newlyweds love each other and have created their own family, the man could only hope that they would feel comfortable. Robin had hoped so too, but he knew perfectly well that some might not be happy with the fact that not a drop of blood had been shed. Next, the king directly decided to address his son's companion, asking the princess, a lady who had become part of Robin's family, to serve her husband well and contribute to the prosperity of the imperial family. Well, her husband didn't want his father to behave so rudely with the visiting lady. Since the new resident of the palace is Robin's wife, she cannot be called a princess. Therefore, the brave son asked to be treated as a full member of the imperial family. Only at such a seemingly sweet moment, the lady only assured herself that the man was not standing up for her, but for his name. Although Robin is the legitimate son of the late empress, it is rumored that all power belongs to the sons of the reigning empress, Polly. Despite his great contribution to the war, the imperial family still treats him coldly. The head of the family also noticed that their return was a little late, although he knew that the newlyweds had gone on a short trip. So the king announced that the welcome banquet had been postponed for a day. The father also noted that his son's disrespectful behavior was unacceptable here. The situation was not very pleasant indeed. It was also a pity about all this unfair show. In reality, Robin's mother was an empress in name only. His father had always loved only Polly, and his mother had hoped that with Robin's birth, she would gain his love. When it became known that the boy had the Trick family's curse, the woman was in despair. She died, suffering from a love she could never achieve. After her death, Polly's mistress immediately became empress, as if she had been born for it. From that time on, the little boy made a promise to himself that he would not die looking for a love that he would never get. At this difficult moment, Robin's chosen one decided to remind the guy about his proposal to pretend that they were in love with each other. Therefore, the newlyweds immediately held hands. But even then, the boy again asked the girl not to think anything of it, since that hug was only to show once again why they had come together. The prince knew that he had to make everyone around him believe that they were driving each other crazy. And in the girl's opinion, it was indeed a rather clever move. She promised to act according to her husband's plan, to play her role perfectly. Siri, yes, it's all just a game, so let them hold each other's hands as long as they can. After the princess's chief assistant learned that the banquet would be held tomorrow, the maid immediately began to seriously think about what clothes to choose for her lady. At the very least, it would be worth choosing something to match the lady's new necklace. However, they were leaving in such a hurry with Sally that they didn't even grab the outfit, and now the lady doesn't have that much clothes. But the time had come for the very dress that Hannah had always put off trying on, considering it too luxurious. But the lady had no idea how quickly the day would come when the lady would be able to show herself in a revealing outfit. The lady felt not entirely confident in this unusual image for her. Besides, the young lady knew how modestly everyone in the imperial family dressed. But Sophia assured the lady that the aristocrats would also dress solemnly for the banquet. And this dress was the best choice at that moment. That's why the main character of this story did indeed show up at the event in the same outfit. But as soon as she was at the banquet, literally all eyes were on her. The lady was already starting to worry that she was wearing too much makeup and was dressed too vulgarly. By the way, even at the banquet, many of the guests were dressed rather modestly. If Hannah had not brought a shawl with her, she would have been in big trouble. Besides, the prince still hadn't arrived, so the lady was left alone. Unfortunately, the guests weren't the nicest, so one of them seemed to have accidentally caught hold of the girl's shawl and spilled wine on her satyr. The girl had to lower her shawl, and everyone saw her deep cleavage in that dress. So was the third prince, Kylo. As soon as he noticed the girl, he decided to make a lewd joke, saying that now he knew why the second prince had chosen the lady as his bride. Looking at the discerning gazes of the other aristocrats, Hannah realized in a second that the prince's position would increase if she looked embarrassed. Based on this, the girl indicated in a loud and confident tone that she would not be afraid to embarrass someone with her ignorance of the culture of the northern kingdom of Trick, since she herself had left immediately after the wedding. She had not had the opportunity to study Trick etiquette. Then she greeted His Majesty, the third prince, and his companion, the princess. Although the girl knew that the mister had brought her here only because of the woman's pretty face. Well, instead, after the introduction, Kylo decided to lag behind the guest. But after what had happened, the lady still heard whispers in the district from other guests about her appearance. The aristocrats were surprised that all Southerners dressed like that. They despised both the girl's makeup and the Southern style in general. The feeling that everyone was now looking only at Hannah was so unpleasant that the lady even thought of going to change her clothes. After all, if she threw on a dirty shawl, it would be even more pointless. As soon as the lady had not had time to call the maid, Earl Robin came to her faster than she expected. As soon as the noblewoman met the prince, she immediately asked him to give her cloak. Of course, the man gave her the cape without any problems, but he also said that they should talk in private. And first of all, the guy asked his companion what she was thinking when she put on this revealing outfit. Mrs. was indeed very ashamed, but all the clothes she had brought were nothing to match this necklace. The girl said that she had brought a shawl with her, but the third prince spilled wine on it. Only at this moment, the guy wasn't angry at his girlfriend at all. It was because of him that the lady was rushing to get ready, so she didn't even have time to get her clothes ready. But he was so caught up in the kidnapping incident that he completely forgot about it. That evening, the guy admitted that it was all his fault. As an apology, Robin promised to appoint someone to teach Hannah trick etiquette and to have new clothes made for the woman. And looking at his wife now, her clothes don't violate etiquette. In addition, the man added that the third prince was probably deliberately trying to offend the guest. And since Hannah is the wife of a hereditary count, this will happen quite often. As the husband had warned from the very beginning, despite the fact that the lady is a princess, she will have no rights. Life in the imperial family is not easy. But even then, the girl replied to the guy that she was completely ready for this, because it was she who asked the man to take her as his wife. So now the lady promised that she could handle anything. After all, Hannah knew that after the overthrow of the previous empress, Polly had finally ascended the throne. Both the first prince, who stole the status of crown prince, and the third prince, who took advantage of the first prince's illness and took all the power in the palace, will die within 2 years. But Robin would become emperor, and the girl was absolutely sure of this, because in a past life, everything happened exactly like that. Robin offered his wife his hand and invited her to come inside. But it was already getting cold outside, and she agreed. The nobles were having fun in the castle, and it seems they didn't even notice that the hosts of the feast had left for a short while. They were more interested in the new gossip. She held her husband's hand and was glad that they had come to an understanding. And she was also worried that her husband was the future emperor, and therefore she would be the empress. If, of course, everything goes as they agreed, then her child will be safe and will become the emperor's successor if he allows it. At that moment, he noticed her looking at him and asked what she was thinking about, but she couldn't tell him everything as it was, so she just thanked him for the cape. He was happy to please her, but his attention was more attracted by the fresh conversations about his wife, which degraded her attire. Robin approached that boor to tell her to shut up, because she's not just a princess, she's his wife, and no one has the right to humiliate her. He was angered by the words of the woman who said that Hannah was still just a princess, because there was no ceremony and she was not his wife yet. But the lady only laughed even more when she saw his anger. It seems she wasn't afraid and even dared to call him weak for losing his tyrant status because of his loyalty to the princess. Robin approached the lady and angrily reminded her of her situation, for if it were not for his loyalty to the court families, most of them would not have survived to this day. Seeing his anger and the seriousness of his threats, the woman became angry but did not say a word because she remembered his status as a cold-blooded killer. Robin shouted at them all, naming each family he had forgiven when they showed support for the forces that challenged the emperor, declaring them to be worse than enemies. And if he hadn't stopped them, then with his sword, all these cowards and traitors wouldn't be here now. So he advised them all to shut their mouths and think before insulting his wife. But there were also those who objected to the emperor, because they tried to save themselves as best they could, and as an apology, they gave up their lands. Robin again ordered them to remember that he was their lord, and Hannah his wife, and therefore they should treat her as a member of his family with respect. Then the man said that they had nothing against the princess, but first she had to go through the wedding ceremony, and only then would they be a family and a couple. After these words, those scoundrels left. Finally, this horrible gossip about the princess was over. Now no one would dare to insult her when her husband was a tyrant. But Hannah remained upset despite her husband's defense. She still knew that there were those who were not happy with her, but kept quiet. She apologized to Robin for getting him into trouble because of her, but he denied it, saying that he was causing her more trouble, so they broke up. He wearily put his hand to his head and said that she'd better go to her bedroom to rest, because she wouldn't hear any more kind words today, so she'd better get away from these people. She wanted to reassure him that everything was okay, but he said he was worried about her and knew she hadn't had much rest, so he asked her to go to the bedroom. As soon as he ordered the servants to escort Hannah out, a man came up from behind, calling for the emperor, for he had a conversation with him. This man introduced himself as Hackle Wreck, and he seemed like a nice guy until he started talking. Robin said that his wife needed a break and wanted to say goodbye. But he dared to say why he was sending her away so quickly. Was he really afraid that these wolves would touch her? Robin said that Hackle should shut his mouth and think twice before speaking, but he just laughed and said that he liked talking too much. Her husband ordered Hannah to be taken to her chambers immediately, while he remained to supervise the guests. So she went with his assistant. She dared to ask him if the man also belonged to the imperial family. She spoke with such respect that he said she could relax and forget the formalities. The servant told her that Hackle was the chancellor of their empire, which surprised her greatly because he looked even younger than the prince. He shared that Hackle has an incredible talent for handling paperwork. Even His Majesty recognizes the chancellor's skills as unique. But he also joked that it wasn't just her who didn't like him, because other people also didn't like him because of his irascible character, and it's hard to disagree with that. Hannah was shown to the bedroom, where she changed clothes and sat in a chair while the maid combed her hair. Suddenly, the guards at her door shouted that His Majesty the Second Prince had arrived, and to be honest, he didn't look the best. He sternly ordered the maid to leave, and as quickly as possible stood before his future wife, with a stern look. She couldn't understand what had happened when she left the room. He looked strange. However, she was afraid to ask anything when he was in such a state. Hannah couldn't believe what had happened. This stern, cold-blooded killer just walked up to her and fell into her arms like a child, hugging her as tightly as he could. He quietly said that it was just awful. When she asked what happened, he asked her to never wear dresses like that again because he couldn't help himself. He said that next time he would just gouge out the eyes of anyone who looked at her like that, and he had already restrained himself from killing them all today. Hearing her trembling voice when she said she would be more careful, he couldn't help himself and kissed her so long and hard that he couldn't let go for a minute. Then he said it was so strange, because the day had been so terrible, but after that kiss, it felt like nothing had happened. He still couldn't understand how this girl's charm worked on him, why her every touch calmed him, realizing that now she was not just a girl, but his future wife. Right after the ceremony, everything inside him flared up when he thought about her, and about the fact that she would be by his side, would hug him, and would bear him a child. Therefore, he could not help but think about these thoughts, and laid her on the bed so that she could feel all his love on her body. She asked him not to rush it because he was so angry just now, and now he suddenly changed. But he insisted that they needed a child. Kissing her on the thigh, he looked her straight in the eye and asked if this was what she wanted when she made a deal with him, and continued without waiting for Hannah's answer. But suddenly, she stopped him and said that she urgently needed to go to the bathroom because it had been a long day and she needed to relax. He agreed and said he would go with her, but she objected because she knew she wouldn't even get there with him, so she refused. Hannah pushed him out of the bedroom and said she wouldn't be there for long, let him wait in his chambers, and she would come as soon as she could. Sophia was very upset when she saw that he was angry and asked Hannah if it was because of the dress that he was so angry, and she confirmed it. She was upset because if the prince had problems because of her mistress, he could kick her out. But she didn't want that and was thinking about how to fix it. Then she came across an essential oil with an incredible smell and decided that it would help Hannah fix the situation. So she added a few drops to the bath so that when her princess came out of the bath, she would smell incredible and seduce the prince. At this time, Robin also took a shower and could not wait for his princess, so he asked the servants to hurry her up. Sophia also entered the prince's chambers, saying that Hannah was still in the bathroom and she really wanted to drink, so she was returning to hurry, but he snatched the tray of drinks from her hands and went into the princess's bedroom and then into the bathroom where Hannah was. While she was taking a bath and not suspecting anything, he watched her at the door, then entered. He said he had already been waiting for her. That's why he came himself. She didn't even expect to see him here, so she dived into the water without looking towards the door. She was surprised that even despite the problems she had caused him, he didn't scold her, but instead wanted to comfort and reassure her, and she began to think that he really liked her. She shuddered at the thought of him and how he had kissed her in the bathroom last night, not even feeling that he was there. When she called Dee to bring her a towel because she was ready to leave the bathroom, no one answered. so she called her again. It was a surprise when he came in instead of the maid. She only said his name softly, not expecting to see him here. He instantly grabbed her hand and pulled her into his arms. He couldn't wait another minute. She had to belong only to him. She tried to push him away and somehow stop him, but it seemed he liked it even more, so she was powerless against him. As soon as he looked into her eyes, he stopped. Because of his animalistic desire, he had frightened his young wife, so he realized that he had made a mistake. She asked him to be more gentle because he had never behaved so abruptly before, and it scared her. But he seemed to be in a fog and didn't hear her words at all. He couldn't concentrate. His thoughts were confused at the sight of her. He asked her to repeat it, because of this scent of her body, he cannot restrain his wild desire, and his thoughts are simply confused in desire. She was talking to him, and he still didn't hear. All he could think about was how to stop so as not to hurt her, and not give in to his instincts. Without thinking for a long time, he lifted Hannah into his arms and, opening the bathroom door, went into the bedroom, holding the girl tightly in his arms. He lifted her onto the bed and stood over her. It seemed like nothing would stop him now, and she knew what she was getting into when she married a tyrant. The girl cried in pain when he pressed her down and started biting her neck. She begged him to let her go, but it was a trap, and he continued to stare at her like a cold-blooded beast, baring his teeth, and her screams only made him more eager to attack. She had already suffered several times that night, and he had no plans to stop. He needed an heir, and the time for that was running out. She tried to hold back her tears, remembering the day she was given in marriage to him, demanding that she serve the tyrant if her life mattered. She had a duty to her father and a duty to her husband. She was merely an object for his desires, nothing more. She was wrong again. He loved her at first, but ended up being just as cruel as her ex from a past life. The terrible night for her was finally over. She lay sadly curled up in bed and told herself that it was her duty to love her husband. He held his head and couldn't understand what had happened to him. He couldn't help himself, so maybe the people who called him a wild animal were right, and he was just a tyrant without feelings. The husband was afraid that his wife would now start avoiding him, and being afraid after everything that had happened, he decided that something had to change. He saw how upset she was, and moved closer to comfort her, because he didn't want her to move away. Robin saw that she was sleeping soundly, and decided not to wake her, although he wanted to apologize to her. He himself didn't understand why he demanded so much from his wife. The next morning, the maid came to ask if they would be having breakfast so she could prepare breakfast. He asked her to prepare what the princess liked, to bring fresh fruit and juice, but he ordered to be quiet and not to disturb him because his beloved wife was still resting. But she listened to everything and got to work. As soon as he returned to the room and closed the door, he was surprised because he didn't expect to see her so soon. She woke up. He gave her water and said hello, talking as if nothing had happened, even though everything about her hurt. Hannah took the water and told herself not to make anything up and just take advantage of the fact that he was in a better mood and wouldn't offend her. As soon as he started to reminisce about yesterday, she interrupted and said that everything was fine. The girl looked down and admitted that it was her fault because she herself provoked him yesterday. He knew that this shouldn't be the case, and it wasn't her fault. He didn't control himself yesterday, but he didn't say what he wanted. He just praised her for being an obedient girl and asked how she was feeling. She admitted that she was fine and apologized again for being late in the bathroom, promising that it wouldn't happen again. She surprised him even more when she said she would come immediately upon his order, and not a minute later, all because she remembered the past and didn't want to disappear with her unborn child. She held on to this life as best she could. Hannah reminded him that she wanted to get pregnant as soon as possible because that's all she needed from him. He was angered by her words and warned her that if this was her wish, she should always be ready. She immediately replied without hesitation that she was ready for any orders. He rose from his chair and ordered her to show up tonight, and he would do what she wanted, no matter what. The girl lowered her head and quietly said that she understood and would come as soon as evening came. The prince came out but immediately sat down on his head, saying what a fool he was and how he was behaving terribly. But his thoughts were interrupted by a servant who turned to the prince to deliver the news. The servant overheard the maids gossiping about the prince's last night, and he began to ask them what they knew. And of course, they said they poured scented oil into the bath, which acted as an aphrodisiac. He also said that he had been in the bathroom and checked everything, and that oil had indeed been used there to seduce the prince. That's why he expressed his opinion that the princess used the oil to seduce and control him. Then he remembered that he had smelled a very strange smell yesterday when he entered the bathroom. The servant asked to punish the culprits because the use of such oils was illegal, but it worked very well. The prince told him that nothing had happened and that he shouldn't get involved in this matter because he would figure it out himself, and therefore advised him to forget everything. Now his thoughts were on Hannah. Why did she use this oil when she knew his addiction to it? But if she wanted to seduce him for the sake of the child, then why was she so cold towards him this morning? He decided it was worth talking to her, because he really didn't know much about women. Hannah was writing a letter, and Dee was arguing that she shouldn't do that to the princess. But she objected and said that everything would be fine. She wanted to write a letter to her grandmother and Mia, to tell them how she was doing and ask how they were doing. Dee said that they were having guests today and needed to buy new perfume because she used it yesterday. The princess took the jar with trembling hands and asked how this could happen because it was an expensive perfume and not a simple one. The maid cried, wanting to make it better, but Hannah objected that it only got worse, and he was like an animal yesterday. Then the girl understood the reason for his behavior yesterday. His mind was in a fog due to the effect of the perfume on him. Then, was there even a drop of truth in what he told her about the child yesterday? Or was it all the effect of the perfume? She seemed happy because she realized it was the perfume's fault, but she was still disappointed because she didn't know the real him. Dinner. He sits alone in a large hall. The table is lavishly set, and there is plenty of food, but his wife is not there yet. The prince jumped up in his chair when he heard the click of his wife's heels in the silence, and was instantly overjoyed. She came anyway and looked incredibly beautiful. He was completely blinded by her appearance. He froze, looking at her, and she quietly asked if he was waiting for her. Robin invited his wife to sit at the table and have dinner with him, and he ordered the servants to leave, because he wanted to talk to her alone. She sat there wondering what exactly he wanted to say, so she asked him first if it was because of yesterday. He didn't know if they were thinking the same thing right now, so he thought about asking what she wanted to say, but didn't dare. I asked her to eat because the food would get cold, and asked her not to rush and to postpone the conversation until later. They began to eat, and immediately he said that he had heard something very strange from the servants, yet he could not help himself. "There was a drug in the water," he said coldly and sternly, waiting to see his wife's reaction. She exhaled quietly, yet he knew that was exactly what she wanted to talk to him about. But he was ahead of her. Hannah began to object and said that his servant was mistaken, because nothing like this could happen. He continued to listen, as if she didn't know. But today, the maid told her that she had accidentally poured medicine into the water, so she apologized. He was angry that because of the maid's mistake, he had gone crazy yesterday, and decided that it was unforgivable because he had suffered. She began to defend her maid when she heard this. She apologized and asked not to punish them. She almost cried, but said she was ready to endure any punishment in her place, just so he would forgive them. He really didn't expect such a reaction, so he asked if she was ready to die for her maid. Then Robin ordered her to send that maid to Sailor, and then he would forget about everything, but she would no longer serve here. This was what she didn't want the most, because Dee was almost like a sister to her, and she didn't want to be left completely alone. She understood that the maid had no right to do that, but she didn't want to order them so much, so she wanted to appeal his decision. She remembered how years earlier, Dee had come to her room with a cake and asked her to try it. Everyone knew the queen had a reception that evening, and Dee knew too. So did she do it on purpose? She placed the cake in front of the princess and begged her to try it as soon as possible, because it was very delicious. Dee could have eaten it herself, but she refused when Hannah wanted to treat her. Hannah insisted because she was kind, so she asked to eat the cake with her, but she refused for a very long time. But she still ate it and didn't regret it, because it was so delicious, so they sat down together, and Hannah shared the cake with her. They had a good time, talked, and everything was fine. They became like sisters. She shared this with her husband, and said she couldn't do it because Dee was the only one she could trust. He immediately began to ponder her words, about the only one he could trust. Remembering myself when I was little, my childhood and loneliness. Then his expression changed, and he still agreed that this time he would forgive her and she would stay, but that it would never happen again. He got up from the table and walked to the exit of the room, emphasizing again that this was the last time. He wouldn't be this nice again. She almost cried. His words sounded very harsh, but he was still the kindest person. She knew that. Even though it wasn't love, they could still be friends. At least that's what she thought. They didn't see each other again that evening, and the next day, Dee asked how the conversation with the prince had gone. Hannah smiled and said how kind he was, but the maid didn't think so. She was very afraid of him. She thought about him. He listened to her and forgave Dee, and she wanted to thank him somehow. While she was thinking about how to thank him, she remembered the letter on the table and an idea came to her. She quickly got up and went to the table. There was a way to find out something. She sat down at the table, took a few sheets of paper, and ordered her to bring pens and ink, and as quickly as possible. His Majesty chose her, so she must marry Count Philip. So what's the deal with Mia now? After all, he kidnapped a woman who was supposed to become a crown princess like her, so she didn't think Mia would be okay in that house. What if the worst happens and she suffers the same fate as Hannah in her past life? She didn't want this, but there were no guarantees that everything in this life would happen the same as in the past. The maid brought a pen and ink, asking to whom the princess wanted to write a letter. She said that she wanted to write a letter to her mother and Mia again, because she hadn't been able to contact them for a long time, especially since she was close to Mia. In the letter, she asked Mia about her life in Salur and her new husband, and the unknown scared her. The man asked the other if his other brother visited the woman from Sala every night, and the other replied that he did. He said that he had seen his brother bring the princess into his bedroom the previous night. He just laughed at his brother because he thought he was only pretending to be right, but in reality he was just like everyone else. The man got up from the table and said he wanted to visit his brother today, and his servant said that there was gossip that his brother was still sick. The man smiled and mockingly said how sorry he was for the Jewish crown prince. At the same time, the maids in the castle were gossiping about the princess and how she had pleased the crown prince. They thought she was beautiful and saw something special about her that attracted men. In fact, they managed to love her because she was very sweet and kind. Their conversation was interrupted, noting that it was not appropriate to gossip about the princess in the castle. It was Lady Dee. She went to the kitchen to get groceries, and the other servants began to respect her. After all, now everyone thinks she's the prince's sweetheart, and they're starting to get scared. Lady Dee brewed tea from fresh Nilnunu tree leaves and taught the maid. This was the first time they had heard of such tea, because this tree does not grow anywhere except in Sal, where the princess came from. Dee ordered the maid not to even think about trying this time, because it was a delicacy for the princess. But no one dared to touch the princess's things, because they knew that the prince would destroy them. Dee asked if he was really as terrible as everyone said, and she noted that they still didn't know much about his cruelty. The maid remarked that he looked scary, but could he really cut off his hand for touching this princess? Hannah was still sitting at the table, thinking about the letters she had sent and had not yet received a reply. In her previous life, after the death of the crown prince, everyone was ready to kill each other for his inheritance. Of course, there were no guarantees that this story would repeat itself, but she wanted to help His Majesty Roots. The third prince was ready to do anything to get a place on the throne, and even won over Rutzi. He lost too much anyway because of the third prince. This time, she decided to reduce the loss of people and change the story. Dee entered the princess's room and brought her tea, asking if she was writing a letter to her mother again. Hannah took the tea and said she would call Dee if she was needed. She bowed to the princess and agreed to go, noting that she would not be far if needed. Hannah plunged into her thoughts again, because the most important thing was how to remove the third prince. Then she remembered her husband, who seemed to be in his office, and within a few minutes, she was standing in front of his door, knocking to come in. His servant opened the door for her, looking at her in surprise. He did not expect to see the princess. He asked why she had come, and she replied that she wanted to visit her husband if he was not busy. Dee was angry about the secrecy, that the door could not be locked, and you could not even look in. He opened the door for them again and said that Hannah could come inside. He was waiting for her. She went inside, and it was so quiet and empty, her maid wasn't allowed in. The girl approached him and saw how busy he was signing documents. but he immediately smiled when he saw her. He was always happy for her. It seems she also forgot all her resentment and was glad to see him. He told her why she had to dress so fancy for him. Hannah just wanted to look pretty for him and come, so she asked if it was all for nothing. At first he was silent in thought, then quietly said what he really wanted to say was how beautiful she was. She thanked him, and his rough tone of voice changed to a gentler and kinder one. In fact, Hannah came to ask him something, but he came so close to her that she forgot all the words when he leaned in so close to her that it became awkward. At that moment, he pulled a straw out of her hair and said how she hadn't seen it before. She immediately became flustered. Because what else did she expect, you fool? But how did he see anything at all in such darkness? The robot leaned against the table and asked what request she had for him. The princess asked him to let her learn to ride horses, which surprised him. She couldn't just tell him that she wanted to see more people and hear more gossip. Robin promised to teach her, but he was busy right now and would call her as soon as he was free. Here she began to worry because she didn't think what exactly he would teach her when she wanted to be alone. He replied that he wouldn't let another man teach her, and she asked if it was because he didn't trust her. Then he said that when learning horseback riding, there would be physical contact, and he couldn't just watch another man touch her. That's why I decided it would be better to teach her than just watch her. And in general, he is very busy, so he suggested that she go for a walk and wait for him when he is free. The next day they were dressed and ready to train. Even the horse was prepared for her. He was angry because he didn't understand why no one in Salura had taught her what they were even doing there, which made her laugh. Then the prince suggested that she approach the horse and be kind so that the horse would get used to her. He taught her how to properly handle a horse and to be careful not to scare it. After that, he explained how to properly mount a horse so as not to get injured. She was worried because she didn't think it would happen so quickly, but he reminded her that she had come to study. He was happy to see her efforts. He even enjoyed being a teacher. He put her on the horse, and out of fear, she didn't even let go of his hand and held on to his shoulders. And then a minute later, she was already on the horse. She was shaking, but she was satisfied and very grateful. The prince suggested that she take a little walk, and he would hold the horse so that it wouldn't run away, and she shouldn't be afraid. It made him laugh how she always acted scared, but to him it was so sweet. A little more time, and she was already confidently sitting on the horse, and he was happy with her smiles and proud and then suddenly the horse got scared and ran away quickly. Fortunately, she managed to stay on the horse. Her tears suddenly flowed from the horse's incredible speed, and she called out to her husband for help. He ran behind her, begging her not to be afraid, and shouted at her what to do to calm the horse and stop it. Although she was afraid, she obeyed him and pulled the leash on herself, just as Robin said. The horse immediately stopped, and Robin caught up with them. The girl sat scared and did not move. The girl turned to him and said that everything was fine. She was just a little scared, but she felt better. He took her hand and calmed her down, apologized, and said it was his fault when he let her go. Robin took her by the waist and pulled her towards him, helped her get off the horse, and their gazes met. He stroked her hair and gently said that next time he would hire her a professional trainer. She thanked him and asked to be given time to rest today after everything. He agreed and took the horse to lead it to the stable, following her with his gaze. Hannah stepped back a little and thought about how worried he must have been about her when the horse ran away. A few days later, she was already learning to ride a horse with a professional trainer. The princess asked her teacher to walk with her towards the forest where the hunters were hunting, as if for a ride. And then suddenly, her attention was drawn to the one she was looking for. The third prince, he also rode in that forest, and she knew about it. He smiled when he saw her and greeted her, asking what had brought her so far. The lady also greeted him and decided to start a conversation. The prince reminded her that he still had before his eyes the beautiful and fitting dress she had worn at the last ball. She didn't like remembering that evening, but he apologized for those words and said that he really liked her then. She remembered how dangerous this man was, so she knew not to get close to him. In a past life, there were rumors that Kylo Wyant had killed the crown prince, and it was very likely true. So she decided to deal with it, but trying not to ruin their relationship. So she decided to be kind. He liked her attempt at being cute, and she also hinted that there was more to her than just her dress that was worth remembering. He praised her ability to ride a horse, even though she claimed she was a novice and just starting to learn and would like to keep him company. But he said he loved hunting and invited her to join him because he was sure she would enjoy it. Her teacher asked her not to rush the hunt because the princess did not yet know how to ride well, especially in the forest. So the husband agreed only to take a walk with her. The princess agreed to go for a ride with him to see how his hunt was going because it was just the opportunity to get closer. And he only liked it more. He loved confident and not timid women, and she seemed to him to be just that. Although her teacher was not happy with the princess's decision, she could not argue with her, so she let her go with the prince. They entered the forest, and the prince noticed that it was too quiet there, and there were no animals to be seen. But it was still worth being attentive and careful. He joked that he had tried so hard to invite her for a walk in the forest, but now he had nothing to show her because there were no animals to be seen. But she admitted to him that she agreed to go with him because she was looking for an opportunity to talk, since the next time might not come soon. And he was only attracted by her curiosity, so he agreed to answer all her questions, and he himself became curious about what game she was playing. Hannah lowered her head and sadly said that she had recently heard from the king about the illness of the next crown prince, and a very serious illness. Judging by his face, it wasn't what he expected. But the girl continued talking, asking if he was worried about the prince. The man's expression changed dramatically. He lowered his head and said that the best doctors did not know the cause of the disease or how to cure it. It scared him. She looked at him very carefully and noticed that he was really worried, but she remembered him from a past life and knew what he really was like. Then, immediately after the death of the first prince, the third prince blamed Crown Prince Rose for his death, calling him a traitor. But in all this war, the second Prince Ruse still won, who was also sure that the third was involved in the death of the first. The third prince said that he had seen his brother, and he was completely different, that he could die at any moment, his face was completely tired, and his body was powerless. Hearing this, she realized that this man had something to hide, and was definitely lying to her now. In a past life, the first prince was able to live longer, and his condition was not as terrible as he is telling us now. Except that the first prince may die much earlier than last time, if his brother's words about the prince's condition are true. The man saw that Hannah was lost in thought, and her face looked frightened, so he asked how she was feeling and if she felt sick. Of course. She smiled and assured him that everything was fine, but she should be more careful so that he wouldn't suspect anything. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by a sound from the forest, as if something was lurking in the bushes nearby. And here's the trouble. It would be better if it was some kind of animal than the very evil second prince, Hannah's husband. He was approaching them at great speed. Robin asked what the two of them were doing in the forest alone and where the princess's escort was. It wasn't safe for her there, and his brother decided to annoy him and told Robin if he really thought they were doing something forbidden. The crown prince ordered his brother to disappear immediately and never come near his wife again. He took up the weapon, but reminded her that he had come here with her at her request and had not forced her. She had a choice. But since this man was still that scoundrel, he took out his whip and hit the princess's horse with all his strength. Her horse jumped on its hind hooves in pain. The princess held on as best she could, but the horse was very angry, and when he jumped again, the girl couldn't hold on to the horse and fell off. Unfortunately for her, she fell right next to the horse's hooves, and he kicked furiously and caught her. Robin feared for her life and jumped off his horse and ran towards his wife to save her. He stopped his horse so as not to cause her any more harm and ran to his wife to help her. Although she assured him that everything was fine, the wounds on her body and the severe pain indicated otherwise. Seeing his wife in this state, he was filled with incredible anger and a desire for revenge. But before he could turn around, his doomed brother was already far away, fleeing from the forest on his horse. The prince stood up, drawing his sword to chase after the bastard. But Hannah begged him to stop. She cried and begged him to stay with her, because if he went to fight with his brother, someone would get hurt badly and it would damage his reputation. But he turned to her and said that he didn't start this war, but he would end it and wouldn't allow his wife to be treated like this. Hannah could not allow the prince to die, so she did not let him go. Otherwise, his death would be on her conscience. She put his hand to her cheek and cried, pleading that she couldn't do it without him and that she felt bad right now. Of course, that stopped him. He couldn't leave her alone in the woods in this state and chase after the scumbag who did this to her. She looked him straight in the eye and asked if he would stay with her and not pursue his brother. He hugged her and promised that he wouldn't leave, but he would still find him. He just wouldn't forgive her. The prince told her that he could never have imagined that Hannah would be so worried about him and not let him into battle. Maybe she did love him, but within a minute he was angry because she said she was afraid of being alone when she wasn't even pregnant with his child. He directly asked her why she was so obsessed with the idea of having a child. Did she have something to hide from him? Of course, she didn't want him to think that way, and replied that it was all because at home, her father treated her like someone else's child. So all this time she wanted to have her own child and give her all the love she wasn't given. She admitted that although she was a princess, it was only in words, but her son would really become the next one and would grow up without knowing trouble. Then he dared to ask her why she chose him as her husband, knowing how cruel he was. The prince also said that he was afraid that the child born to him might also not receive recognition and would suffer bullying like him. Of course, this upset her a little, but she didn't give up on him as a husband and said it wasn't true. She assured him that he would definitely become Emperor of Tricas. And, so that he wouldn't ask how she knew, she assured him that she felt that way, and her son will follow in his father's footsteps and be recognized as the next prince to his father Robin's throne. Taking his hand, she said that even if the future wasn't the way they wanted it, she would do everything to make sure they were at least okay. The prince, holding her hand, told her to get up because it would be difficult for her to ride her horse, so he suggested she sit on his. So they slowly drove together towards the castle. It was time just for them, after such a deep conversation. He felt her shaking as she hugged him and asked if she was very scared, and she replied that yes, very much so. Robin apologized because he thought this wasn't the life she imagined when she became his wife, and she didn't know who she was marrying, so he sympathized with her. But Hannah hugged him and told Robin that she didn't regret marrying him at all, that she hadn't regretted her choice for a single day. Of course, this reassured him, because he thought that deep down she was disappointed in him and his situation. So he told her that he would now fulfill her wish and try to have a child for them as soon as possible. And he really wanted to come to her bedroom in the evening, but he said she should rest and he would wait until she felt better. Hannah objected, assuring him that she was fine and he could come, but Robin insisted on her recovery. He loudly said that he would not touch her until she was completely healed, and he asked her to take care of herself and her body for the sake of the unborn child. Hannah laughed at his intense concern, even though he was very worried, but she listened to his request. As soon as they arrived at the castle, she went to her room where the maid was already there and cried when she saw her lady. Although Hannah assured her that everything was fine, Dee was very worried and asked how she could be helped. Dee dressed all her wounds and insisted that Hannah rest, and that if she needed anything, the maid would bring it. Hannah thanked her for her concern, but assured her that Dee could go rest too, and if necessary, she would call her. When the maid left, Hannah sat alone, looking at her wounds. Still, going hunting with that tyrant was a bad idea. Now she realized that she had provoked the third prince, and this led to her quarrel with Prince Rutz. She heard a knock on the door and thought someone had come, probably the maid, so she asked Dee if something was wrong. But how wrong she was when she saw the prince enter the room, not the maid. She wasn't surprised that he came so late, and so she asked if something had happened. But he said no, nothing. It turns out he came to see how she was feeling, and if she needed help, he wanted to keep her company. When she said everything was fine and the maid had dressed her wounds, he was embarrassed and said that was good. Then he had come for nothing, but Hannah stopped him and asked him to stay, and said that she had learned from the third prince that their brother was seriously ill. Robin turned and looked at her, as if he didn't know about it. Her goal was to prevent the third prince and Robin from meeting, and perhaps then she would avoid a conflict and fight to the death between them. So she told Robin that if the first prince died, then there was a chance that he would be blamed for his brother's death. What will he do then? It's worth thinking about if it's true about the illness, she said. He looked at her with some aggression and sternly asked what she meant now. She said she didn't mean anything like that, It's just that the prince isn't well, and the relationship between Robin and the third prince is very strained, so. Then she stopped and said that she was probably just exaggerating and worrying for no reason. He shouted at her that it was none of her business what their relationship was like, or what was going on in his family, and left. She thought it was better to tell it like it is than to remain silent, and was sure that they would figure it out now. As he walked down the hallway and thought about her words, he finally admitted that there was some truth to them, and that he had been so angry for no reason. Because the third prince, Kylo's brother, is capable of such a thing. He can kill one and frame another. Standing by the door, he thought about everything, and yet, remembering how many times Kylo had tried to destroy them but failed, he was clearly angry now. Robin called his servant Evan and asked if there was any news from the boys who had been sent to the Crown Prince's castle. And he also added that the servants should report to him about everyone who enters and leaves his brother's castle, and also keep a close watch. But still, before leaving, Evan asked if something had happened, and if it was worth worrying about. Robin told him that there was a chance that Kylo could kill the first prince, something Evan clearly didn't expect to hear. Robin also said that there was nothing that could stop him, and if he wanted to become the next prince, there was no doubt that he would get rid of the first one. Evan hoped they would have a chance to stop him, but he knew the likelihood of Kylo doing so was very high. Evan wanted to save the first prince, but Robin said why would he, if that was how they could get rid of them both at once. If the Empress's two sons kill each other, it will be a wonderful turn of events for the second prince, Robin. Now he was more carefully considering the plan of events for the future. He needed to observe and look for evidence against his brother. Evan left the room and said he would let me know if anything happened. Robin stood by the window and looked at the sky. At that time, Hannah was already lying in bed and dreaming. It had been a hard day, so she fell asleep quickly. Robin entered her bedroom and watched her sleep. He touched her face and brushed her hair away, continuing to admire his beloved. While she was fast asleep, he sat on her bed and said, "What if he lost the fight with Kyle and died? He will not leave her anyway, and will not let anyone offend her, because she belongs only to him." He promised her that he would not allow her to lose, and that they would have a future child who would inherit the throne. A few days later, she was sitting with Robin on the horse. He was hugging her body, holding on tightly. The prince told her everything he knew about horses and how to treat them so that they respect you. And he also told her that you need to have character and not feel sorry for your horse. And this applies not only to him. She didn't understand why he was acting so excited, and the others were looking at them, or if he was doing it on purpose. She turned to him and said that he didn't have to teach her when he had so much to do. She even admitted that she wasn't comfortable, but he still pretended not to understand what she was talking about, as if he had always been like that. And then again, the horse got scared and jumped up, and Robin pulled Maddie's collar, trying to stop her and calm her down. Hannah laughed. It seems she's no longer scared of the horse and its antics. While she was laughing, Robin got angry at how funny she could be. She smiled again and told him that she had never seen him so excited, which was why it was fun. But he froze looking at her, having already forgotten how beautiful she was when she smiled. He should make her happy more often to see that smile. It seems that her smile woke up not only him, and he, sitting behind him, moved closer to his wife. And when she turned her head to him, he leaned even closer and looked straight into her eyes, and then at her lips. She couldn't stand the pressure of his charisma and turned away, telling him that this was unacceptable and that he should stop. So he also saw that there were many people around who were staring at them, but he wasn't too worried about it. But for her sake, he agreed, and told her it was time to get off the horse and go to another place where there would be no one else. Robin took her by the waist and helped her down, saying he had an idea. He looked at her with an excited look and said he would take her where no one would look at them. Evan had been watching them all this time and laughed when he saw it all. He knew that the training wouldn't be long. He would have liked to say something else to them, but they were too busy with each other, so he decided to let them be alone. They came to the bedroom and started kissing passionately, because he hadn't felt her for so long. He continued to kiss her, and she softly breathed out his name, and he asked how quickly she wanted to get pregnant from him. And stopping, he looked at her and waited for an answer, but she said that she wanted to conceive a child from him as soon as possible. It was exactly the answer he was expecting, so he laid her on the bed and started kissing her. He took off his shirt and stood over her, saying that he needed an heir and he wanted her to bear him a child. After that, it was the best hour they spent together. He was as gentle as she wanted. As they lay in bed, she asked him why he said that. About an heir when he died? She asked him if he really thought about his death and felt that it was coming soon. Robin kissed her on the forehead and told her not to worry, because he had no intention of leaving her alone to die in this cold castle. She looked at him and said that if the first prince died, and the second, Robin, won the battle for the throne, he would become Emperor of Tricas. He asked her not to tell anyone about it, because if he became emperor without being crowned, he would be accused of treason. Hannah promised to be careful and not bring up this topic with strangers. She closed her eyes and began to fall asleep, and he was still thinking about her words. Emperor, that sounds good. Yet he saw the prospect that if he became emperor, then Hannah would become empress, and this would give her security. He, who once wandered the battlefields to save his life, will finally have the opportunity to become emperor. Robin thought about her again. She still never ceases to amaze him since their first meeting. The prince smiled and recalled the time when they first met, their quarrels and jokes. It excited him. He couldn't believe that this beautiful and fighting woman belonged to him and would soon bear him a child. Looking at her sleepy face, he promised that for Helen Plake, he would become whatever she wished. Burning with love, he hugged her to warm her and kissed her head, inhaling the scent of her hair. A few days later, Hannah and Dee were spending time together when the princess complained to her that she was very tired. Dee brought her some tea to relax, which she was very glad about because she didn't have the energy to do anything. While she was drinking tea, she noticed that someone had looked into the room. It was Evan who happily greeted the princess. She asked him if something had happened, and he replied that Prince Rutz wanted to go to meet the Empress. And then Hannah realized that she, too, would have to prepare for the meeting with the Empress, and it was advisable to start as soon as possible, especially since Evan had emphasized the urgency of the train, and she was worried that something bad might happen. Less than 2 hours later, the princess was ready. As always, unsurpassed, Evan said to the princess. Many would not be happy to see the princess decide to join this meeting. And to make it look more expensive, Evan asked the princess to wait and called a servant. A man entered the room holding a large wooden box. It was a gift. He placed it on the table and began to carefully open it so as not to damage what was inside. The women almost fell and were speechless when they saw this luxurious fur coat. It looked incredible. Robin came up and asked if he really liked it that much, seeing his wife's delight, and said that now it was hers. He threw a silver fox fur coat over her shoulders and looked her straight in the eyes, while she still stood shocked by such an expensive and unexpected gift. The prince looked at her and noticed that she looked incredibly beautiful in it, and he asked her to wear the fur coat more often. When she agreed to wear this fur coat, he was delighted and said that now the next thing would happen. She didn't understand what would happen next. Many maids entered the room, each carrying a large chest. In fact, he recently found out that his wife's measurements were taken, and so, having learned what she likes, he ordered her gifts. Each one had jewelry, dresses, and various expensive items, and she couldn't believe what she was seeing. These were all incredibly rare and valuable things. She had only heard about them, but had never seen them. The prince said that if she didn't like something, they would send it back, and she shouldn't worry about it. Looking at how his wife was dressed, he said that she was beautiful, and that it was okay to leave. The road was still long, and he also intrigued her by the fact that there was another gift waiting for her on the street, and it was much better than all of them. He smiled and held out his hand to her, suggesting she come with him. He would show her something. She stood outside, her mouth barely covered in delight, and couldn't believe what it was all about. The princess asked. Before her stood a magnificent mare with a huge ruby on her chest. She was magnificent and very obedient. He saw her delight and asked her anyway if she liked such a gift. The princess still didn't believe it and asked if this mare would really be hers now. He assured her that it was, because she needed more training, and he also suggested that she get on the mare and try to ride it herself, although she was worried about whether it was worth it in such expensive clothes. But she still dared and went up to the horse. She stroked its soft skin and was glad that now she had her own animal. This peaceful moment was interrupted by Robin, who suddenly took her by the waist and lifted her up, placing her on his horse. She thanked him for such gifts, and especially for the mare. She was incredibly beautiful and obedient. But Robin noticed that she was very red and asked if everything was okay, because she seemed to be feeling sick. The princess replied that she felt very hot, probably because of the cape, but each time it became more and more difficult for her to speak. He smiled and suggested that she get off her horse and quickly go into the house. She awkwardly thanked him again and thought that these gifts were too generous for her. But he didn't want to hear that, because he thought it was unbecoming of a crown princess to consider such things unworthy of her. She would have liked to object, but he interrupted her, because she herself wanted him to become emperor. Then she should get used to expensive gifts. He promised to make her the most luxurious and richest woman in this country, because she was the future empress. The princess looked at him with those cat-like eyes, and she really wanted to say something, but he interrupted her again, because he thought that now there was no point in talking. He hugged her and kissed her, the two of them unable to be apart from each other, and still not admitting this love. Later, Hannah noticed some letters on the table, and of course she was curious about what was in them. Dee took them first. She was also very interested in them, and said she wanted to check them out. But after reading that they were letters from the crown princess and the princess's mother, she handed them to Hannah to open them herself. The girl was incredibly happy to receive at least some news, because she was already starting to worry. She hadn't heard back for a long time. She just sat there and cried as she read them. Her mother wrote that everything was fine, and hoped that Hannah was fine too, and asked her to write more. Dee was worried and asked what was in the letters, and why the princess was so emotional and crying. Then she wiped her tears and took another letter from her crown princess in Tricus, hoping that she was also well. The crown princess wrote that she was very surprised to receive a letter from Hannah and asked how she was doing. However, when she was writing it, a man came up and asked what kind of letter she was writing and to whom, and she told him. He didn't tell her anything about it. That's why the princess wrote that she and Count Phil were living in harmony. The count told his wife that he had business and would be late, and she also wrote about this in the letter, that he was very busy because they had found new minerals. She wrote that he is caring and quite generous, and even though they don't spend much time together, he is still kind to her. She also wrote that the count was badly wounded, and he really doesn't like it when people mention his wound, but she doesn't know where he got it. Still, Hannah was glad that Mia was doing well, and that she wasn't settling in too badly, at least for now. And unlike Hannah, Mia is building an influential family, and therefore Count Cheddar wouldn't dare treat her badly. She really hoped that Mia would not suffer the same fate that she once had, so she had to be careful. At this time, the third prince was whispering with a man who claimed that thanks to something there, their goal, the emperor, would soon be fulfilled. He handed the prince a folder and asked him to carefully examine it. It was a special offer. A few days later, the castle was not quiet. Hannah wanted to send a letter in response to Mia, and some kind of nice gift. She was thinking about it. She asked Dee if it would be a good gift if she sent some expensive homemade wine or some fabrics with the letter. Hannah also refused Dee's help and said that she would talk to the prince herself, and at the same time tell him about the Chitara mine. She's already walked around the castle looking for him, but he's nowhere to be found, not even in the office. So where is he? The girl saw Evan and approached him to ask about the prince, who replied that the crown prince was in his chambers. She asked to tell the prince that she had arrived, so Evan knocked on the door and announced her arrival. But Robin refused them, so Evan explained that he was very busy right now and was putting the military command system in order. As soon as she got upset and said she would come another time, she heard the phrase to come in. Robin put things aside and ordered Evan to let his wife in, so he joyfully opened the door and invited the princess in. When she entered, she saw her husband sitting very intently, looking at his books. He really had a lot of work to do. As she got closer, she saw how dark his office was, and remembered that he also kept the bedroom dark, wondering why. As soon as she thought about it, she heard his voice as he said that he felt much calmer in the dark. He said that like a snake that loves damp and dark places, looking straight at her, like a predator at its prey. After his words, she remembered herself when she still lived with her father. She also felt like an animal, but a frog. Compared to the other rooms, which were filled with luxury, hers was gray and dreary, like a swamp of frogs. And she added that in order to survive, The frog needs to return home, to its swamp. Robin stood up and approached her, saying that since they were a married couple, they were both stuck in this quagmire, and there was no way out. Then he leaned in to kiss her and said that maybe right now they should hide in the shadows of that bedroom. She thought about refusing because she said it was daytime, but he assured her that with him she would forget it day or night. But he kissed his beloved wife passionately. He craved her constantly, her and her attention, and then he stopped, looked her in the eyes, and ordered her to tell him why she had come and what she was hiding. She said that she really wanted to send a gift to her friend in Sal, and that's why she came to consult with him. He thought about it and asked her what ideas she had, what to choose from, and she suggested fabrics or good wine. Robin recommended a few drinks and said he would make a list and send the maids to buy them for her, for which she was very grateful. And the prince also remembered Kyle and asked the princess if he had been approaching her, because he thought he was up to something. And considering he planned for her to fall from her horse, it's best to be careful. And indeed, it was good that Robin had spoken about him, because she remembered how, in a past life, he had gathered a huge army and attacked. The prince saw that she was thinking about something, and so he asked her what had happened, if he had really come to see her after all. She was embarrassed, but told him that no one was coming and everything was fine. She was just thinking. The crown prince asked her to tell him immediately if Kylo tried to approach her or say anything. He told her that what he hated most was when his own property was encroached upon, and she was his wife. She was shaken by these words. The princess turned to him again because she wanted to say something else, because he had somehow remembered that the third prince had ordered her kidnapping from Count Phil. Robin was curious about what she was getting at, and she continued that a letter had arrived from Sal, and it seemed that Count Phil had found something, some very expensive mineral, and she thought that maybe what he was planning was related to the mineral. She knew that from a past life. She clearly remembered the words that thanks to the mineral, they would finally be able to put an end to the demon of war. She didn't know what kind of mineral it was, but she understood that it was something very unusual and worth investigating. And Robin said the same thing. It needs to be investigated. She was very happy because her plan worked. The prince will soon find out everything. And the princess also noted that they might decide to trade this mineral and asked if the contract would go through Baisha. Here, Robin also thought about Baisha, the port city that Sal gave as reparations. If you think about it that way, it's possible. She was about to leave him so he could think this plan over for himself, but called Evan for help to figure everything out. He watched her trail and thought about how she seemed to be sitting alone in the castle, but knew so much information. To him, women who were intelligent and clever seemed seductive, and once again, he realized how lucky he was. So Baisha, the trade routes there are really very well established. We need to send someone to monitor. Still, his wife has good thoughts, so that's what he will do. He called Evan and said they would follow his wife's plan and have them check Baisha for strange new minerals. Dee noticed that the princess returned quite quickly and asked about the gift, but she said that the prince would arrange everything. Dee said that Her Majesty Mia was so lucky. Not only did she marry Count Phil, but she also received such expensive gifts. Hearing this, Hannah sank into her thoughts, remembering her past with that man and the torture she had endured. Dee noticed that the princess was upset and asked if everything was okay. Of course she said yes, everything was fine. She was just thinking. She didn't blame Dee for saying that, because she didn't know everything that happened in her past life, and Hannah trembled as soon as she heard his name. And Dee also mentioned that while the princess was away, a man from the Empress's castle had been visiting them, which clearly interested her. In a few weeks, the Empress is hosting a tea party, and Princess Hannah should join in too. It turns out that it is customary for the imperial family of Trikas to gather like this regularly. It will be worth preparing. Hannah thought about the imperial family, and it seems to her that they're not very welcome there. Although the gift will still be worth preparing, she caught herself thinking that she couldn't always walk around so gloomy, because after all, she was also the Princess of Trikas. Then she decided that she should find out about everything they liked, and Dee promised that she would take on it and find out everything by tomorrow. Then the maid reminded her that it would be worth preparing a dress for this meeting, taking one of those that the second crown prince had given her. The next day, Dee came very happy, because she learned everything she wanted and came to share. She said that that princess loves to read books, and her sister, the third princess, is delighted with expensive jewelry. And to Hannah's surprise, she learned that the empress was interested in martial arts. The girls laughed, discussing everything. They even started thinking about gifts for them, books, jewelry, and weapons. Hannah figured that the books weren't a problem, but the jewelry and sword would cost her a lot of money. She gave me ideas for cheaper things, but Hannah knew that everyone in the imperial family had excellent taste in things, so it was worth preparing valuable gifts. She still decided that she couldn't handle it on her own, so she went to her husband, who reassured her and told her not to skimp on money and gave her an assistant. The girl was still grateful for his offer, but she really wanted to figure it all out herself. She couldn't always rely on help. A few days later, they began preparations. An important day was ahead, and it was good that the prince agreed. The gifts arrived very timely, even in the last minutes of the most important day for her. The maid prepared the princess, did her hair and makeup, and complimented her on how flawless Hannah was as always. Evan entered, apologizing for interrupting their conversation, but His Majesty Lutz ordered him to give her something. Hannah got up from her chair when she heard this news. To have Lutz himself send her a gift, it was very unexpected. Robin entered his wife's bedroom and asked if today was the day she would have afternoon tea with the Empress. She excitedly replied that yes, today, and she was going to go out soon. Robin noticed that he had come very early and held out his hand to her, showing her a small red box and asking her to open it. She took it and immediately began to open it, curious to see what was inside, another gift. There was a tap in the middle. She was incredibly happy to thank him, and he asked how she knew what it was. Hannah said that she bought one herself as a gift for the third princess, who loves expensive jewelry. He was delighted and praised her for her good choice, and asked her to put on the ring and go to the castle and be sure to brag about it. Hannah was surprised by this advice, but he assured her that if it ignited jealousy in her, the princess would be ignited by the desire to receive the same. Then Hannah will give her that ring like a bone to a dog, and the princess will be delighted and will side with the girl. As he put the ring on her finger, he noticed that her hands were so white that the blue diamond would shine even brighter. Since time was running out and the prince was stirring up desire in her, she decided it was time to run away and said they were running late. He didn't have time to finish when in a minute the princess was gone and the door closed behind her. But he ordered the servant to report everything to him later. The princess and her two maids were already hurrying to meet the imperial family. The golden doors of the luxurious throne room opened before them. It looked resplendent. Hannah's mouth dropped open, saying that she had never seen anything like it before. A greenhouse made of ice. She was delighted, and the maid behind her asked the princess to be careful and look under her feet so that nothing happened. The empress and her two princesses were already sitting in the hall, waiting for her, having greeted her. The empress noted that today she had specifically ordered that this particular garden of hers be opened so that she could enjoy it. Hannah bowed to the empress and thanked her profusely for her kindness and for the invitation, as if she were glad to be there. So let's meet. Maybet is the next princess after Empress Tricas. Joba was the third princess of Tricas, and even further from the throne. She was the first to see the ring on Hannah's hand, and therefore immediately greeted and seemed to be pleased with the second princess. Hannah tried to be very polite no matter what, so she thanked the third princess for her kindness and invitation. Yet the second princess felt negativity from them, especially hostility from the empress. The empress suddenly spoke to her, asking if Hannah had any problems with the second prince. Hannah assured them that everything was fine, but she angrily asked where their children were if they had been married for a long time. The empress sternly scolded her because she knew that they saw each other every day and there was no child, so the problem was her. Hannah knew that the empress would not be happy about their children, but she said it just to spite her. Then the empress turned to her again and ordered her to see a doctor and undergo an examination in order to finally get pregnant. The princesses nearby laughed at her, and Hannah quietly agreed to everything just to avoid a fight. And the woman once again ordered the first princess to take good care of the prince, because she had heard from his doctor that his condition had worsened. Hannah tried to pretend that she was calmly drinking tea, but she herself understood that it was necessary to change the atmosphere. She also remembered the gifts, and asked permission to bring them to give to each one. The empress looked at her with contempt and asked what she had prepared, and then she asked if she could show it. Hannah called the maid and asked her to bring gifts. If this was their first time meeting, they shouldn't come empty-handed. Another princess asked if these were just ordinary souvenirs from Sala that everyone had already seen. And then she peeked at the beautiful packaging and asked if it was a dress or maybe jewelry. Hannah assured them that there was no cloth there, and now they would see everything for themselves. Just wait a minute. First, she presented a gift for the empress, and she said in surprise, "A sword?" Hannah asked her to open it, because it was the only sword of its kind from the best master in Tricassi. The woman took out the sword and began to examine every millimeter of it. She knew perfectly well what kind of sword it was, and noticed that there really was no other sword like it anywhere else. Hannah smiled and remarked how the empress quickly recognized him, and she said she already had a similar one. However, she thanked him, appreciating the princess's efforts, because she knew how difficult it was to get a similar item. Although the empress tried to hide her emotions, and Hannah saw her smile that betrayed the joy of a woman, she liked it. Now it's time to open a gift with a book, not just any book. The princess ran her hand over the book with delight. It was a book by Lev Timur, a master of humanities, and she clearly remembered her husband's words, to arouse jealousy and then give her what she wanted. Then she gave the princess her gift, and when she opened the box, she couldn't find a place for herself when she saw the taffeta relay, the most desirable thing among women. The princess asked with delight if it was definitely hers, and Hannah replied in a calm tone that it was. But then the princess looked at the necklace she had received, and then at the ring Hannah had, and began to compare. But the empress strictly closed her, ordering her to be grateful and maintain her dignity. Otherwise, she would behave like a child. Now, the empress knows that Prince Rutz values his wife. If he allowed her to buy such gifts, it is worth keeping an eye on her. She remarked to Hannah that she was impressed by such rare gifts, but the girl assured her that she was happy to try and thanked her for the welcome. Then she wondered if she could earn a place among them if she kept trying. But the first reason to be at this reception was to get closer to the first princess and learn about her husband's condition. So Hannah turned to them all and said that she hoped for more such meetings. The empress also had her own interest in her, so she said she would try to arrange this more often. Later, the princesses met separately, and she said that she had already read the book that she had been given. The princess also asked Hannah if she had read it, because she really liked it, and Hannah was embarrassed but admitted that she hadn't. But she still praised Hannah for having good taste, and whether she even read, and what she liked. Hannah told the girl that when she was at home, she was lonely and read a lot, but after getting married, she had no time for that, and was busy with her husband. Then Hannah asked the princess if she had any particular reason why she liked to read, but she said that wasn't really a reason. She mentioned her husband's health, which isn't very good right now, and no one knows why, so she's reading to figure it out. She is used to reading a lot, and time flies by imperceptibly. Otherwise, her days seem like an eternity. It seems she became obsessed with books, because no one cared about her, and there was no one to confide in. Hannah even felt sad and wanted to sympathize with the girl. She herself knew what it was like, so she told the princess that if she wanted to talk, she could always come to her. The princess advised her not to worry about her, but still agreed to maybe read it together sometime. Hannah confessed to her that she couldn't imagine how lonely she was, and just wanted to understand her feelings. The first princess smiled, thanked her for her concern, and said she could recommend a book to read. Lunch. Hannah comes to meet her husband, and he says he's heard about how much time she spends with the first princess. The girl admitted that it was, but they just talked and read, sharing books. But Robin advised her to be more careful with that woman, because she might be as much of an enemy to him as Kylo. But she admitted that the princess was a very good person. She often shared news with her about her husband's health. It was this information that interested him. He wanted to learn more about his brother's health. She said that his condition had deteriorated dramatically recently, and if he left them, Kylo wouldn't sit idly by. Obviously, because for him it would be an opportunity to take the throne, he said. But he was worried about why Hannah was so interested in Kyle. It seems she understood what her husband was thinking. Perhaps she was too caught up in thoughts about stopping the third prince. Robin said that he was the second prince and the future emperor, so it was his duty to watch over everyone. But his wife seems to be handling it much better. The girl admitted that she was doing all this for him because she was worried about his life. He understood that, especially after that kidnapping incident, they should be careful and vigilant. He even got upset that he was powerless then and couldn't protect her. But now everything is different. He is more powerful than ever. Hannah sat quietly, thinking about something, and then turned to her husband. But he assured her that she had nothing to fear. Otherwise, this constant anxiety on the girl's part made him think that she didn't trust him. But in reality, she was worried about something else. One horror never left her mind. The thought of Count Cheddar. She is too afraid of him, remembering the past. Just one thought of him, and her body freezes in fear. This fear haunts her and keeps her awake at night. So she now wanders around the castle more and more often at night. But she hasn't told her husband about it. Robin remembered their conversation earlier because he had received reports of the sales of goods at the market, and also reports of smuggling, which is also quite common there. It turns out that these illegal transportations need to be covered up. Hannah immediately asked if Count Phil was involved in this, but Robin didn't have enough evidence to confirm it yet. He could arrest him, but first he needs to find out who is running the whole operation. She asked him what they had learned about that mineral, but unfortunately, not much. But the main thing was known: it was dangerous and could break. This was what she feared most: the explosive mineral. Now it was clear why Cheddar was so happy. Robin said that if the Count or Kylo joined forces, they could easily create a weapon of mass destruction. And if that happens, they will seize the mines en masse, and this is a direct danger to the prince, so action must be taken. He agreed with her. We need to gain control over the mines and that ore as soon as possible. She was very happy that he was listening to her, but it was still interesting. In a past life, Kylo and Cheddar were also together, because they knew for sure that the third prince alone would not defeat Prince Rutz, so it would be logical for him to unite. Now is the time to take action on their behalf. He smiled and raised his glass of wine. Seeing her face, he already knew very well that she was planning something. Well, the prince told her that he would never let Kylo win, so they shouldn't worry about anything. Robin sat and thought, as he had before, drinking alone with his worries, and was consumed by the thought of what he had to decide. Decide for yourself, and as soon as possible. And now the anxiety has gone. The quality is so calm that I have already forgotten that it was not always like this. Before, he couldn't trust anyone. At least it seemed that way. But now he himself wants to believe and trust Hannah. A few days later, at training, Robin was present to watch the knights train. A blond man quietly approached from behind and greeted him happily, saying that they hadn't seen each other for a long time and that he hadn't forgotten him yet. Robin remarked that such a fragile flower should be in a castle but not here. So what brought him here? The Chancellor replied that calling a man a fragile flower was rather disrespectful, and he handed him a scroll and advised him to carefully read its contents. Robin didn't quite understand what it was, or why, but the man said it was an order from the Emperor regarding today's military exercises. The Chancellor said that he did not read the contents of the letter, but still learned what was in it from the servants when he received it. The prince asked him if he always talked so much. He smiled and replied that this was what helped him find solutions to the problem. Then the prince, while reading, asked what problem he was talking about this time. The man smiled and said that the prince, as usual, was not interested in trifles, and got to the point. Since the Chancellor was still standing and talking, the prince did not hesitate and asked what else he needed to leave. So he asked if the prince would like to sign the contract. Hearing this, the prince turned and stepped aside, and said that they needed a quieter place to talk. So they stood in a far corner where no one went, and the man asked the prince if he had heard of a place called Rohand. Robin immediately thought about what this man wanted to offer, and of course said that he knew about that city. All they knew about those lands was that it was eternal winter, and it was impossible to live there because of the severe cold and wind. But recently, a certain person has been visiting those places more and more often, and he found out who it is. Robin was already starting to get angry that he was dragging out the story for so long. He needed the names, and immediately, as he threatened that he had little time, the Chancellor laughed and said that he had not been lied to when they told him about the prince. It turns out that not so long ago, Kylo asked him about his need for a quiet, deserted place, away from everyone. At the time, he didn't pay much attention to it and advised him to go to Rohan's place. But now he started to think more and more, and he had suspicions. Robin was very grateful for the valuable information, but still asked why he had told it to him. If he already talked about a deal, then what is his benefit and what does he want to ask for? He smiled and said that although he called it a deal, he was not really looking for any benefit for himself. For him, the greatest desire was the peace and prosperity of the Tricus Empire, and Kylo could put the Empire in danger. And he also came closer to the prince and had to say something in secret. He believed that the second Prince Robin would make the best leader of the Empire, that is, the Emperor. So he supports him. Robin asked if he had heard, and the Chancellor had indeed appointed him heir to the throne, and he nodded in agreement. But he warned Robin that if he found out that he was a threat to their kingdom, he could retreat at any moment. "Anyone who hears this might think the Prime Minister has become an emperor," said Robin. But he said that he was only trying to give the Emperor and the princes the right advice to guide them on the right path. He even gave the third Prince Kylo several warnings himself, but he didn't listen to him. The prince was still happy, because having a working ally on his side is not a bad idea, so one should be grateful. If the Prime Minister's words are honest, then the prince has no reason to refuse him cooperation. At the same time, Hannah was sitting in her chambers, looking at a book, when she heard footsteps. Her husband entered the room, so she quickly got up and greeted him. He came to share the news about what he heard about Kyle's recent visit to Roxand. According to his thoughts, he believed that he was preparing a split in the Empire there, and this could turn out to be true very soon. He admitted that the Chancellor himself had told him this, and agreed to support the prince in the war for the throne. Hannah also remembered that Kylo tried to gather an army and then was caught unawares. But now she knows everything and can prepare. In addition, Prime Minister Trakiasa also supports the next Prince Rutz, and this time she is not subject to Cheater's influence, like in her past life. So she said she had an idea, to pay more to the outbidders and snatch the money right out of Count Phil's hands. Since he had thought about her words carefully, she asked him what his ideas were. First, he wanted to gather all the evidence of Kyle's betrayal and then stop him. He decided to fight him one-on-one, and Hannah asked if His Majesty the Emperor knew and approved of this. Since he remained silent, she understood that he had not told her and was not going to tell her brother because he had no evidence yet. Therefore, he planned to act secretly so that he would not be discovered, because he did not want to risk the plan and asked her not to tell either. He stroked the girl's hair and praised her for helping them protect the mineral and the Empire. She emphasized that this was her duty in marriage, and he was glad that she did not regret this marriage. She looked at him and reminded herself that she had never regretted her choice of husband. Robin said he feared the disaster that would happen if he didn't marry her. Thanks to Hannah, some of the obstacles in his heart were dispelled, and he had never been as calm as when he was with her. He continued to caress her face and look her straight in the eyes. He loved his wife more and more every time. She could never have imagined that he could be so honest with her, that he had really opened his heart now. Now she also wanted to respond to his feelings. She didn't know if she would succeed, but she knew she would definitely help him. At least she would try. Hannah told her husband that if he was investigating the third prince's crime, she would try to do everything she could within the castle. She had an idea to get close to the third prince's wife, though Robin doubted she would pay attention to Hannah. She said that when there was no one in the castle, the third Prince Kylo could give orders. He smiled and said that she was more serious now than ever. He confessed to her that he thought she was a small and weak woman, but it seems he was very wrong. She thanked him for the compliment and was glad that he saw how hard she was trying. He asked her to try her best and said that the third prince's wife loved winter fishing, so he advised her to take advantage of that. Robin went back to his business, and Hannah was left alone with her thoughts. It was time to come up with a plan. In a few days, Kylo received permission to leave the castle, and the reason was that quarrels had begun between the Easterners, and he promised to settle it. Hannah asked her husband if Prince Kylo had actually gone to Roxand, and he said it was possible. The prince said that he too should find a way to leave the castle and follow him, and she should gather evidence if her husband is busy with his brother. But Robin looked at her sad face and said he could see how she didn't want him to leave the castle. Even though she assured him that this was not the case and that she didn't need him, she was still worried about him so that he wouldn't get injured. He said if she really cared that much, then she should just wish him luck in the fight and he would come back to her. Hannah asked the prince if he wanted her to make him a belt ornament. She told me that in Trikas, they weave belt ornaments from threads for those going to war. He was moved and said that he would order Evan to prepare the threads for her and bring them to her bedroom. When the night passed, she would no longer be able to see him just like that every day. So she decided to secretly follow the third prince. He will get the evidence and then report it to the emperor. And then he will know for sure that the battle will take place. Robin was also sad because he didn't want to leave his wife. So he hugged her and said he wanted to spend more time together before he left. She lowered her head and remained silent, and he asked if she didn't want it as much as he did. She leaned against him and assured him that she really wanted to, but was shy. He kissed her, giving her confidence. This time was worth spending together, because the war was going to war, and who knew for how long. The prince asked her whether he should order a bath to be prepared for them now, or wait until evening. The girl couldn't help but jump into his arms and start kissing him, asking him to stay with her a little longer. He looked at her and said he would have the bath prepared, and they would spend the evening together. They agreed to take a bath, drink tea, and meet again in the evening, for the whole night together. It's already evening, and the two of them are kissing, because you remember they still needed to conceive a child and an heir. The girl asked him to take care of himself and not take risks for the sake of heroism. He assured her that she had nothing to worry about, and that for her sake, he would definitely return safe and sound under any circumstances. And then he looked at her, smiled, and said, "That returning beaten after a fight isn't a bad idea either. Then she'll always be there to take care of him." He looked at her and laughed, saying it was just a joke and she had nothing to worry about. He said that when she reacts like that, he wants to tease her even more. He likes to play with his wife. He blew out the candle, placed it on the bed, and this evening belonged only to the two of them. The next day, Evan entered the princess's bedroom and brought a box of yarn because he heard she was going to knit. She thanked him and was very happy that he had received such colorful and durable decorative laces. She looked around and wondered what to knit for her that would suit the prince. Evan noticed that the princess was only taking 2 threads and said that if she needed more of them, she should let him know. She agreed and said that white and red would suit the prince best. She said so confidently that she would make a beautiful prince's belt. But what should she do? Where to start if she's only seen it but never done it herself? Then she remembered the first princess and decided that she could ask her. She reads various literature and perhaps studied weaving with threads. And then she thought that it would be unfair if she asked someone for help and decided that she would definitely do it herself for the prince. And then she looked at the threads again and began to worry about what to do. Within a few hours, she came up with something she didn't understand and couldn't give it to her husband. She just wanted to be helpful. But something was wrong with her, and it was still worth asking for help. Then she heard voices from the street. Men were preparing horses, and so Prince Robin was preparing to serve his sentence in Roxande. And suddenly, she began to feel anxious and worried. As soon as she thought about the possibility of him getting hurt, her heart felt like it was breaking. Then she gathered her courage and decided that she needed to finish the decoration for the prince so that she could protect him and bring him home. And at the castle, the maid came to the princess to tell her that Princess Hannah had come to meet her. She drank her tea and thought about why Hannah had come and what she needed, because she was constantly clinging to the first princess. Now she decided to stick with the third one, but she's not so simple and refused to meet, saying that she has a very busy schedule and doesn't have time. The emperor was talking to Robin at this time and said that he did not like the fact that both princes were far from home, but he emphasized that this was an urgent trade matter and required an immediate solution, which is why the emperor did not object to his departure. The emperor asked the prince to return as soon as possible, and he promised not to stay long. And when he left with the army, having gone a little further from the castle, he ordered the servants to stay behind, because he would go further alone. Robin knew that where he had come was the only place in Roxande where he could secretly raise an army. The prime minister told him about this place, that behind the dense forest there is a wide clearing that is not so easy to get to. He walked through the forest and didn't see any tracks. They must have hidden them. The chancellor couldn't be mistaken, and there was definitely someone there. Still, he made it through the dense forest and saw a clearing, seemingly the same one, and hid behind a tree, his hand on his sword. And peeking in, he saw something terrible. After all, this was the place he was looking for. Now he knew for sure. There were many swords, armor, and a lot of blood lying in the clearing. Something terrible had happened. He had no choice but to return. So the very next day he returned to the castle. In the evening, he was alone with his wife and told her what he had seen. The third prince moved his troops to another place. It seems he still suspected something and hurried to change places. Now I don't know where to look for him. It now seems like searching for Kyle will take much longer than they planned. Hannah wondered how exactly she could help. She rewound memories from the past and present. He saw her excitement and said that he never expected help from her, so she shouldn't apologize. It was he who should protect her. But still, she regretted not being able to meet the third princess to learn something. That evening, she asked Dee if she wanted to go to church to pray with her. But Dee asked excitedly if that would be a problem, and Hannah still didn't understand why. Dee believed that praying in a temple dedicated to another god could cause trouble, meaning the god Nuska would become angry. Hannah explained that she was not going to glorify Drakim instead of Nuska, but she claimed that all the temples in Trikas were for the worship of Drakim. But she had no choice. She couldn't go to Sala to pray, and she needed the god's support. The princess told the maid that it would be very difficult for her here if she did not pray to Nuskus. Dee said if so, she would call the head maid and they would take care of it. She also said that the temple may require wearing special clothing or etiquette rules. The princess was very grateful that Dee would arrange everything and said that she couldn't have done it without them. And Dee joked so that she wouldn't forget that she was a reliable maid and loved. She went to find the head maid to make arrangements, and Hannah happily lay down on the bed and closed her eyes to sleep. The next day, Hannah still went to the temple, accompanied by a maid and a knight. The princess noticed that the temple was quite far from the castle, which was done so in order to glorify God in silence, the maid said. The princess realized that people didn't come here often. The hall was completely empty. Every year, the emperor and empress personally perform rituals here, and they only come for coronations or when the country is in bad luck. The young man approached them and greeted them, but he had never seen the princess before, and so he began to ask who she was. The knight introduced her as the wife of the second prince, so the boy said it was an honor for him. She smiled and said she was also glad to meet him, and came to pray for her husband and his safety. The boy showed her where to go, offered to take her to a place where she could be alone. The maid said that if she followed the priest, she wouldn't get lost and would go straight to the prayer room. She followed the boy, but noticed how young he was, and how he was already a priest. He approached the door of one of the rooms, and said that this was a room for ordinary believers, and she saw a tall, beautiful building in the window, and asked him what was there. It turned out to be an annex that contained prayer rooms for priests and a ritual hall. Even His Majesty the Emperor is not allowed to enter there, so he advised to be careful. He said that if an ordinary person enters where the god Drakim lives, they may leave this life, which is why he warned her. All this was watched by the high priest, who became interested in the princess. He greeted her and wanted to learn more about the new convert, who she was and what family she came from. The priest introduced her to the chief priest as the wife of the second prince, who escorted her to a room to pray. He greeted her and wished her husband good health, introducing himself as Hamers, high priest of the god Drakim. She lowered her head sharply because she realized that she was looking at him too intently, which was against the rules of etiquette. The girl said it was time for her to go, and the priest, on the contrary, became very interested in her, calling her an interesting woman. She didn't understand what he was talking about, raised her head and looked at him, asking what he was talking about. He noticed that despite her appearance as a weak little woman, he felt her powerful strength from within. The priest said he felt like she had been through a lot, hadn't she? The princess pretended not to understand what he was talking about, thanked him for the kind words, and reminded him that she wanted to go pray. When she left, he told her to come back more often, because she would be very welcome here. It seems as she expected from the power of the strongest priest. He sees through her and seems to understand everything. She went to pray, and he was still looking at her footprints, thinking about his own. Robin sat in his office and talked to the official, asking if he had obtained evidence against Kyle. He replied that yes, but he still learned something and verified that it was true. Robin asked to arrange a meeting for him with a man who had information about the prince. That man lived near Roxand. The Prime Minister asked if the prince would tell the Emperor everything he learned, so that he could decide for himself how to deal with the third prince. The prince promised that he would. Then the official asked to take him with him to that meeting. The prince clearly did not expect this and did not really want it. But the official emphasized that he would be a witness for him and confirm everything to the Emperor. Still, he was right here. But the prince thought that he despised such dirty affairs, and he agreed. But now the circumstances are different, he emphasized, noting that now is an unusual situation, and the prince of the empire is trying to commit treason. Moreover, he is protected by the emperor himself. Therefore, it is he who must support Robin and stand by his side to prevent that betrayal and make sure that the emperor does not ignore this information. And so, they still went to the emperor and told him everything they knew about Kyle, about all his insidious plans. And the Prime Minister, as promised, confirmed this information to make sure that the Emperor would support them. The official also tried to attribute all the credit to the second prince and said that it was he who investigated the case. He pointed out to the Emperor that this might be too much on his part, but emphasized that he could not simply be left unpunished. The Emperor held his head because he could not believe that one of the princes could commit such a betrayal, because he thought they were all one family. The Emperor asked Second Prince Rutz if he could catch and bring that traitorous bastard to him. Robin said that as soon as he gave the order, he would immediately begin to carry out his order and bring his brother. Hannah, expecting that the war between the princes would soon begin, finished the decoration for the prince's belt in time, and it turned out very beautiful. But suddenly, someone knocked on the door. A man asked if she was in the room and could come in, but it was not her husband. She allowed him to enter. And it was Evan. He excitedly ran to tell the princess that her husband was already preparing to set off on his journey. But he said that he was not going alone, but with an army to detain the third prince, and that she should hurry. She was scared for him, because she knew this day would come, but didn't think it would be so soon, and asked when exactly. He replied that it was even faster than she thought, because the prince was preparing to leave tomorrow. "How about tomorrow?" she asked. "Why so soon? She must spend this evening with him and give him a piece of jewelry to serve as a kind of amulet." She barely managed to keep from crying, saying that she really hoped for his speedy return. But Evan said he knew for sure that if the prince left, they wouldn't see each other for at least a month, because the journey alone would take a lot of time. He also said that he had spoken to the prince and asked him to tell his wife that he would meet with her tonight. And he noted that he understood everything, so in order not to disturb them, he would send all the servants to their rooms so that they would not go near their bedroom. She said that it wasn't necessary to take things to such an extent. It was just a normal evening. But Evan said that it was the prince's order to send everyone away and not to interfere with them. He had his own wishes. She realized that she was in for a stormy night and couldn't argue with his order, so she simply agreed. Then she thought that time was running out, and it would be worth preparing for his arrival. And she also thought that despite the few times they had spent together in bed, the servants might think something bad about them. If she continued to behave like this tonight, she would have to meet the prince as calmly as possible. Until evening, she stood at the window and waited for her husband, wondering when he would return. It was already so late, but suddenly, she saw him arrive on horseback. She knew he had a lot to do, but she already missed him so much. Hannah immediately ran to the bed and sat there, waiting for him to come in and kiss her. The girl tried to stay calm, but was too excited to control herself, and even more so when he entered her bedroom, and affectionately called her a chicken. He apologized for keeping her waiting so long, although she was still happy to see him sooner or later. He smiled and said, did she really wait for him and want him that much? She was embarrassed, and he saw it, and said he was joking because she blushed. He put his head on her shoulder and said that he was just happy to see her, and at the same time sad that he had to leave tomorrow and wouldn't be able to see her every day. Hannah said that she was the same way. She was happy, and at the same time sad about this breakup. The prince continued to lie on her shoulder and said that he was very tired because the day had been very long and hard. She suggested he rest, but he said he remembered his duty to his wife. So can he go to bed early, leaving his wife without attention and love? Of course he can't. So he began to gently kiss and hug her, knowing it would be the last time. He laid her down on the big bed and started kissing her harder and harder, and that was all she wanted. After that, she told him that she had gone to pray and met with the high priest. And I really wanted to know more about him, so I asked my husband what he knew about him as a person. She was surprised to find that the high priest was much younger than she had thought. Robin stroked her hair and smiled and said that it was nothing like that. She was still wrong here. It only looks deceptive, but in fact this old man is already 130 years old and is well preserved. She couldn't believe she had been so wrong about his age. He didn't give himself away at all. Robin then said that he might be older than they all thought. The prince told her about his supernatural power, which had only recently appeared, and because of it, even the emperor did not stand in his way. But I also heard that the priest owed something to the imperial court, only no one knew what. Destroying monsters is primarily the temple's duty, but due to their number, even the imperial court had to intervene. And yet, at the end of the game, the imperial family took on this duty and at the same time a curse. She asked what exactly he meant by the curse. It turns out there is a legend, and that's why no one takes it seriously. He covered her and said it was time for them to go to bed because they had to get up early tomorrow, and they needed to have more strength because the day would be long. Hearing about the curse, her soul was even more agitated. She had never heard anything like it before. So before falling asleep, she turned to him and asked him to promise that he would return safe and sound. He looked at her again, smiled gently, and promised to come back and kiss her again. Thinking about the long separation, he couldn't help but hug her tightly, holding her close to him. The princess smiled and, closing her eyes, began to fall asleep, not thinking about anything bad next to him. The next morning promised to be good, sunny weather. Everyone was preoccupied with the next events. Robin was already standing in front of the mirror, looking at himself in his armor, while Hannah stood behind him, holding his sword. She came closer and held out her sword to him, looking very sad because she couldn't accept that he was leaving. He took it and thanked him. Today, he looked much more confident in his victory and his imminent return. He returned to the mirror again and adjusted his armor, but he noticed his wife's face in the mirror, her head down and very sad. He smiled at her and said that she looked like she was going to cry like a baby. She didn't object because she was worried, but he told her not to worry. They had already determined where the third prince was and prepared the best army. They set traps around the area where the battle is supposed to take place, and now they just need to attack suddenly, and it will all be over. He assured her that their army was much more powerful than Kyle's, although she still asked him to escape if anything went wrong. The prince simply smiled at her again and said that instead of talking such nonsense, she could have done something more useful. Oh, really? She forgot about the amulet she wove for him. It's a good thing he reminded her. Otherwise, she almost missed the opportunity to give it to him. She ran to her room and asked him to wait and not to leave without her. It wouldn't take long and she would be back. He stood there, smiling at her, and she ran as fast as she could to bring the amulet. She reached the room and took the amulet, and now quickly ran up the stairs to the prince. The maids shouted after her to be careful and not fall, because he hadn't left yet, they said. He saw something rushing behind him very quickly. It was Hannah running towards him before he left the castle. He laughed and asked if she would run the same way when he was gone. He ordered her not to run around like a child and to take care of herself, because until he was gone, she would be responsible for their castle and would be in charge. She handed him the amulet and said that if he didn't like it, he could return it. She would make another one, but he smiled and said that it was nothing like that. He liked everything and he would take it with him. He thanked her again and said he would take care of himself and she should take care of herself. She took the amulet and started helping to tie his belt and said that she was uncomfortable because they were hugging in front of everyone. Everyone really looked at them, not because they were gossiping, but because they thought they were cute and wanted love. She tied it so tightly that it wouldn't get lost, either on the road or in battle. It looked great. Then the prince ordered everyone to mount their horses, because it was time for them to set off on a journey that would be long. But suddenly, a carriage, very luxurious and seemingly imperial, blocked their path. The empress ran out of there, ordering them all to stop. It seems she had just learned about all the events. He smiled and asked in a calm tone what had happened that had made her come all the way here. Since this was the first time she had come to visit him, she believed it was a misunderstanding, and Kyle couldn't have done that. They had confused him with someone else, and it wasn't his fault. Then this made him laugh even more, and he asked why she had come to him then, if she had to explain it to the Emperor and not to him. And he clarified whether the Emperor simply did not want to see her and listen to her whining about Kyle and his innocence. This made her furiously angry. His impudence, and how he dared to speak like that about her son, believing that he was the one who was putting him before the Emperor. He expressed his understanding of her concern for her son, but said that it would be a problem if she lied to him like that. And he said not to worry too much. If Kyle doesn't resist him, he will be merciful and won't harm him. And then he ordered the army to gather, because they were leaving. And they were leaving so late because of the delay on the part of the Empress. Then he turned around and said that he almost forgot something, because he was distracted. He approached his wife and thanked her for the gift, looking her straight in the eye. He lowered his head to her and pressed his lips to hers, saying that he wanted God to hear her prayers. And they merged into one in a kiss before he left for the war for a few months.